Good morning. Let's try that again. Good morning. Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for joining the State Game Commission today with the New Mexico Department of Game and Fish. It's wonderful to see all of you here today. We are live in Las Cruces. God bless Las Cruces, New Mexico. Yay. And we are also via live stream. We are on Zoom. And so thank you, Department of Game and Fish IT personnel. You're doing an awesome job. And I know we have some people also connected on stream, okay? So let us get started. My name is Sharon Salazar Hickey, and I am the chair of the State Game Commission. And this meeting is now called to order. So, Director Sloan, Mr. Secretary, can you please take roll call?
Commissioner Salazar Henry.
Present.
Commissioner Lopez.
Present.
Commissioner Bates.
Here.
Vice Chair Vespach.
Here.
Chair Salazar Hickey.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Director. I want to make it very clear that we heard Commissioner Jimmy Bates online. He is not present, but he is here. Hello, good morning, Commissioner Bates.
Good morning, everyone.
Okay, very good. Just wanted to make sure that we had you there. Third agenda item is approval of the agenda. It's an action item, and is there some discussion, Commissioners?
Move to approve.
I do think we need to just adjust a few things, maybe. In the executive session, I don't know how important it is to make a record of it, but we're going to need to switch a few things. No, I take that back. We're going to keep the executive session first, then the property second, and then the personnel matters third. I thought there might be a change, so there is not a need for that change. So do I have a motion?
Move to accept agenda as written.
Thank you, Commissioner. And second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner. Do we need to do a roll call vote on this because we're live?
Madam Chair, I believe because we're in person, we can just do a regular vote unless you discretion.
This is Assistant Attorney General Greg Smith here. I would do roll call vote since one commissioner is online, please.
Oh, very good. Okay, roll call, thank you.
Commissioner Salazar Henry.
Yes.
Commissioner Lopez.
Yes.
Commissioner Bates.
Yes.
Vice Chair Vespach.
Yes.
Chair Salazar Hickey.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. That was very good. I hope this meeting is going to go as quickly and efficiently as we just have been doing so far. Okay, agenda item number 4. This is the consent agenda. Action items A through D. Approval of minutes from October 1st, the virtual special meeting. Revocations, wildlife depredation report, special hunt deadline. Discussion? Shall we just, Commissioner?
I do just want to speak about our conservation officers and looking at all the reports we got for revocations. And where is Colonel Griego? There he is. So just real quick, just let your officers know they're doing a good job. And all the revocations we're seeing today is not because our people are violating. We know they are, but our officers are out there patrolling and catching the violators that are harming New Mexico's wildlife, and accommodation to them. And if there's any listening online and the ones that are here today, keep up the good work. You're saving our wildlife and our taxpayers. Thank you so much. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Would Director Sloan please just state the new special hunt deadline dates that are going to be approved, just so everybody, I know half of my husband's hunting buddies are here, so they better write this down.
Madam Chair, the bear and turkey draw permits are February 9th. Deer, elk, pronghorn, oryx, ibex, Barbary sheep, bighorn sheep, and javelina draw licenses are March 16th, all of 2022. And then pheasants and sandhill crane, August 17th, 2022.
Thank you, Director Sloan.
Any other discussion? Do I have a motion?
Motion, Madam Chair.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Madam Chair.
Jimmy. Jimmy seconded.
Okay. Director Sloan, can you please take a roll call vote?
Madam Chair, if I could just make sure we have a clarity on the record, that was a motion to approve as presented.
Yes.
Second. What are we doing? Oh, yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Salazar Henry,
Yes.
Commissioner Lopez,
Yes.
Commissioner Bates,
Yes.
Vice Chair Vespach,
Yes.
Chair Salazar Hickory.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. That was very good. Okay, now, moving on to item number 5. This is the David Souls Memoriam. First and foremost, before I say a few words, I want to recognize a number of people here in the room today. And as I say your name, could you please stand up? State Senator Souls, Mike Souls.
Bill.
Bill. State Representative Small. Thank you for being here. Former Congresswoman Torres Small, Undersecretary for Agricultural and Rural Development. Very good, thank you. Former Game Commissioner and current Superintendent of Las Cruces Schools, Ralph Ramos. Oh, he had to leave. Okay. Well, thank you very much for being here today. In the late 1980s, Harry Truman.
Madam Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
can we recognize a couple of other people that
Oh, absolutely.
that you didn't catch coming in?
Okay.
We'd like to recognize City Councilors Cassandra Gandara. She's also the Mayor Pro Tem.
Oh, very good.
We'd like to recognize City Councilor Gil Sorg, and soon to be our Soil Conservation District representative. And we'd like to recognize our current Soil Conservation District representative, Kevin Bixby.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. I'm sorry I did not get that list of names earlier. Okay, so thank you. Thank you, thank you. In the late 1980s, Harry Truman said, "It's amazing what you can accomplish if you do not care who gets the credit." This rings true about the selfless, displayed acts by David Souls in his conservation efforts. David is regularly described as passionate, humble, generous, kind, adventurous, and dedicated. He is greatly missed personally and professionally by me and all the commissioners. My first path crossed with David in January of 2020, when I was appointed the State Game Commissioner and Chair. Very quickly, David became a mentor as I was becoming familiar with this position. And I may not have known him that long, but his enthusiasm, his passion, and dedication was clear. His hard work and tenured experience has and will continue to help guide this commission in carrying out our duties. Thank you, David. Since David's passing this past spring, there has been such an outpouring of respect and honor to such a great man that had given his life to wildlife, to conservation, to hunting, to the sports and activities of this great state and this great country. I would like to thank all of you for your presence as we waited for the appropriate moment to honor Commissioner Souls. Being here in his beloved Las Cruces, his home, at the foot of the Oregon Mountains with his family and his friends, it seems the best way we can honor his memory and his impact on our community. Outside of his tenure on the commission, David's work on the Oregon Mountain Desert Peak Monument brought to life, both literally and figuratively, God's gifts. He had the impressive knack to bring people from all walks of life together and foster a love of wildlife, wild spaces, our natural resources, and of course, our beloved New Mexico. I am sure many others would like to share their memories, and so I will be turning this over to Commissioner Roberta Salazar Henry. But first and last, I would like to close with this quote from Abraham Lincoln: "Leave nothing for tomorrow which can be done today." We can all learn from David and live every day advocating for our passions. Commissioner.
Good morning, everybody. I know this is a tough day. No tougher, the people that have the toughest are sitting right here in the front row. Nancy, Kevin, Keith, Robin, Nancy's wonderful mother, Lizelle, Bill, Cassandra, Grip. Thank you so much for letting us do this. I know this is probably more closure for us than any of you guys. It's not closure for you. I am so proud of the number of people that showed up today to honor a life well lived. I used to think that was a kind of a cheesy thing to say, but David, he lived his life to the max. He knew what he wanted. He touched so many people. All of that is a testament to what a great person he was. And his family that he's left behind is a testament to what a great family he raised and was a part of. So, I know we're all hurting, not as much as Nancy, but today, this morning, we're going to celebrate joyfully his life. Because I know that's what David would have wanted us to do, is recognize the great things and the fun and not the stuff that everybody's been dealing with. So in a few moments, I'm just going to kind of lay out the agenda here. Our talented public affairs staff is going to play a video they created with all the pictures and video testimonials that were sent in from David's friends and colleagues that just wanted to be on record for you, Nancy, Kevin, Keith, Robin, your wife, Keith. I don't know why I can't think of her name right now. So we're going to start with that. It's about a 10-minute video, and I just want to say a big thank you to Lance Cherry and his staff for doing such a wonderful job and getting all that, and for allowing me to keep pestering them to add one more, add one more, add one more. I also want to make sure that you know that we're going to present the family with a recognition gift from the commission, his commission family, and the Game and Fish Department family to Nancy. And then we'll ask people that want to come up and would please. There are so many groups represented here today that he was involved with, and so we'd like for you to come up and say a few words if you want to. If you don't, that's fine. Just having you here is just wonderful. And then we're going to close with the Field Operations Law Enforcement staff honor guard and presentation of a flag to Nancy. It's a wonderful day, really, and I'm hoping we can all keep his great spirit in mind and not dive into how we've been trying to deal with this since he left us in March. So, Lance, take it away.
Hello, it's Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham. Thank you very much for the opportunity to address this meeting and speak about the late Commissioner Souls. I know the pain of a sudden loss. I know that the grief that comes from losing a loved one or a close colleague never really goes away. It changes you, and it changes how you look at things. Even 6 months after his loss, it's important to reflect on who he was and how he went about his advocacy for New Mexico's great outdoors, particularly here in his hometown of Las Cruces and beautiful southern New Mexico. David Souls was a devout conservationist, an engaging storyteller, a beloved husband, father, and grandfather. His great service to this commission and to our state was only part of the legacy he leaves behind. He loved the outdoors. He loved New Mexico. I know his loss is still felt deeply by those who knew him and worked with him and loved him. And I know his fellow commissioners and those who care deeply about the work of this commission will continue to carry out this important work in his memory.
And I'm sure none of us really thought we'd ever be in this position of doing a tribute video for David.
From the first time I met Commissioner David Souls, his passion for wildlife and wild spaces was clear. What was also clear was his advocacy for getting others outdoors to share the experiences that he had had. He was at once playful and inquisitive, always setting you at ease but asking important questions, and always willing to share.
David was one of the most intelligent, compassionate, and caring gentlemen one could ever have the honor to call a dear friend.
Days with David meant long walks, wonderful places, and the very best days.
On those long days is when David showed us the joy of a perfect orange, usually after a hot, sunny day.
David Souls was a dear friend of mine.
David was a blast to be with. He was a fantastic hunter, great stalker. Made a plan before we ever left the perch where we were looking at whatever animal we were looking at.
David was the kind of guy you wanted in the field with you. He knew every square foot of southwest New Mexico, and he was the best damn spotter I ever hunted with.
I learned quickly by observing David that he was a quiet listener, a person who reflected deeply on what he was hearing in the opinions, ideas, and comments that people made at our meetings, whether they were staff or public members or fellow commissioners.
David was on our board of directors for the last 11 years. Relied on him more often than I really realized I do now. He was really a mentor, he was a guide, an interpreter, an evangelist for the land. He was a friend of mine, he was a friend of all of us at New Mexico Wild.
David was, in many ways, one of the primary spark plugs behind the successful Oregon Mountains Desert Peaks National Monument and all that it protected, especially the cultural areas that he mapped over years and years. He gave so much back to me and my family, and he brought that same ethic to everyone he knew in southern New Mexico.
David taught me the joy of discovery, knowing that it was so much more often a process than a destination.
David was all about discovery, all about looking at a new place on a map, talking with people about places, and then getting out there and trying to find that one place to retrace that route or to find that place in history.
You've heard the old saying, well, it ain't rocket science? Well, with David, it was all about rocket science. And David's family was his number one priority, and his close friends weren't too far behind. But I don't think David ever met anyone that if he wasn't occupied with priorities number 1 and 2, that he wasn't willing to lend a helping hand to.
David was man enough to admit that Nancy was the better driver.
And I will always be grateful for his thoughtful leadership and communication and advocacy around the very concepts of public land and of public wildlife, wildlife held in trust by the state of New Mexico.
He was one of the kindest, most generous, gentle man I've ever known. He had this seriousness. He was very passionate, but what I remember a lot of is him laughing. He would find ways to laugh, and I appreciated that. So.
He had the strongest sense of personal ethics and a sense of perspective, and that meant that David welcomed new viewpoints, different viewpoints, and he seemed to love different perspectives.
What I'll miss most about Commissioner David Souls is that passion for the outdoors and everything in it.
If I have one wish for his family and all those who loved and cared for David today, it is that they take that wonderful spirit and that gracious man's image into their heart today and hold it there forever.
David will live on every single day in the places we go, the people we say yes to going out with, and the way in which we show our love for the outdoors, their special places, and people all across.
And we will miss him every single day.
Love you, David.
Love you, David.
There'll always be an empty chair for David in Northland.
We miss you, David. Thanks for everything.
I love you, David. Always will. And I know you love me.
I miss you, David. We all do. And here's to a life well lived.
At this point in time, I want the commissioners that haven't had a chance to speak, but mostly as a favor to one of David's favorite women, besides his wife. No? You guys are good? Okay. Well, we're going to start with the commissioners that haven't had a chance to speak, Commissioner Lopez, Commissioner Bates, and Commissioner Vespak, and then we'll ask everybody else that wants to come up and say a few words. So you want to go first, Chers?
So, Nancy, when David was an inspiration to me. I'll never forget when we first were having a meeting. It was a very controversial meeting regarding the wolf relocation. And we had a good meeting. It was actually here in Las Cruces via Zoom. I was quail hunting that weekend down here. And he called me up immediately afterwards and, Terzio. I was like, yes, Dr. Souls. And don't call me Dr. Souls. How many times I got to tell you that? He told me. He goes, are the livestock people upset at me? Can I go? Are they upset at me? I was like, no, they're not upset at you, Dr. Souls. You're going to be okay. Are you sure? Is everything okay in the north? You're okay, Dr. Souls. So he was always studying and wanting to know what was going around in this state. He was always concerned about not only conserving New Mexico's wildlife, but what the other side of the aisle was going to say and what he was concerned about. And that was just amazing to him. Another time, he called me regarding the land grants up north and wanted more information on our land transfer we're trying to do with them. He wanted the history and we stayed on the phone 2 hours. I was sitting outside in the parking lot at Walmart, and I would tell him, don't give David a mic, because he could, and he heard everything I told him and was able to make a well-thought decision, and it was always about conservation. And one time I asked him when he first got appointed again, who's older? And I looked to Senator Souls, and was it you or Senator Souls or Mary Lee? And he goes, you're gonna have to figure that out on your own. Never have, didn't ask. But, you know, your father, your brother, your colleagues, he was an amazing man. And I was shocked when I got the news. And it is a loss, not only to the family, but all to the entire state. And he is greatly missed, but he is an inspiration and will continue to be an inspiration to the department, as well as numerous conservation associations throughout the state, and as well as to the industry of agriculture, because he understood how both mixed and could coexist to make New Mexico a better place. Thank you.
Commissioner Bates is ready to speak, if you would, Vice Chair.
Commissioner Bates?
Yes, good morning. What a wonderful video tribute, and I could echo many of those same sentiments about David. I didn't get to meet David until we worked together on this commission, and immediately I was so impressed by his broad base of knowledge and the depth of that knowledge. And I heard someone mention him being inquisitive, and I recall that from our meetings as well. And oftentimes I was sat through the first several meetings without ever asking a question, because David would not only touch on the surface of what I wanted to inquire upon, but he would dig deeper and uncover and get to the root causes. I admired his dedication, his intelligence, his patience, his guidance, and that admiration only grew with each passing day that I was able to work alongside him. I guess my lasting impression that I will forever hold in my mind is his smile, that big, broad, beautiful, infectious smile. And thank you all, and God bless you.
Yeah, I really look up to David. He's just a model human being. I think about him all the time when I'm thinking about facing a difficult situation or something like, you know, how would David approach this in just a fair manner? And but also thinking about just time spent with him, and it was such a gift being on the commission with David and getting to spend that extra time with him. And so, you know, I wanted to share, we got to spend a day together out looking at the Bolson tortoise restoration on the Turner Ranch. And every stop we did, we turned around and he would just had so many questions. You've never seen a tortoise researcher so excited that someone wanted to learn every single aspect of Bolson tortoises. I mean, he wanted to know everything. And then after the trip, we'd get emails like, he was doing research and discovering where the shells had been found, and it was just, I mean, he got to the bottom, but he just had so much fun on that joy of discovery that's been mentioned. And so I miss him. I think about him all the time, and it's just nice to see how many people he touched and inspired and changed our lives. I mean, and left places and experiences for us to have.
I guess I'll go last. So, most of you know me, and you know my personality. I'm just kind of straight and direct, and David and I had a blast having conversations, sometimes hour conversations on the phone on a subject matter. And of course, 9 times out of 10, we were on opposite ends on how to get there. Not on the issue, but how to get there. And so he would end his conversation with me, Roberta, I sure enjoy our conversations because I know we're both on the same side. We're just going to have to figure out what our path is. And so I love that about David. I love that he was willing to debate an issue and then mull over what you had to say. And he would come back. It was never combative. It was never my way or the highway. And I just always appreciated it. He got me. He knew how to talk with me. I would get texts from him on political issues. What do you think about this? And I'd lean over and tell Steve, he's texting me about the CD race up in Albuquerque. And he was just wanting to learn more about what was going on. So that was a great example of his inquisitiveness and wanting to learn more and understand more. Nancy, he was so proud of being married to you. I don't know how you put up, we spent, how many of your friends got to celebrate your anniversary with you? He would pick some fantastic place, he would learn something, and he would invite all these people to go be part of that special day. Because to him, it was, you're my friends, and I'm so proud of being married to this woman, so I want you to know how much this means to me, because you're here helping us celebrate. I'm going to end by saying that he is what I believe to be the best of what we all should strive to be when we decide to give back to our community as a public servant. I want to thank you, Nancy, Kevin, Keith, Robin, and all the grandkids that I don't get to see here today for sharing David with us, because you gave us a gift. You were very generous with giving your time that he could have spent with you doing something else. And so I think all of us here recognize what a gift you gave us with David. Does anybody, well, I know what I want to do. You're not coming to the front?
Are you talking to me?
All of us, all of us. So one of the most fun things about working for the game department, it's not the salary, it's not the work hours, but way back in the early 70s, we had a director, Bill Huey, who was really good friends. He lived in Tasuki. He was really good friends with the owner of Nambe Foundry. And so the department's logo is a bear head. And that's one thing we're all very proud of. Between the badge and the bear head, those are the two things that mark us as game department groupies, employees, whatever, forever lovers. And so you stuck with the game department because not only was it a fun place to be, the work was so great compared to other agencies, but because you knew when you left the agency, you were going to get a bear head. So as recognition, employees who retire from the game department are presented with a bear head. And then for a long time, commissioners, as they left their service from the commission, were presented with a bear head. And this was one of the things I thought, as David's commission family, as his department family, that we needed to present you, Nancy, with his bear head. And so what this bear head says, New Mexico State Game Commissioner David Soles, recognizing dedicated public service to New Mexico's wildlife and all those who enjoy wildlife. And then his terms of service. So if anybody wants to come up and say a few words, now would be the time before we end up closing the ceremony. So keep your masks on. We want to make sure that we adhere to all the rules. And so I appreciate anybody. Sochi, are you still time crunch? Would you please come up first so that we can get you to the airport?
So unlike David to take time to try to be ahead on the schedule, he would be the one in the back row doing all the work, making sure, taking note of who he needed to check in with, and following up on every single thing that was said. will keep learning from David every time I get frustrated. I'll think of the way he'd turn that into an opportunity to laugh. Every time I get lost, and he'd turn it into a way to explore. Every time I'd want to get mad at someone, and he'd turn it into an opportunity to learn. The best example for me was learning how to tell a hunting story. And the best hunting stories are the ones when you don't succeed. and it just, you turn that experience into the story and into an opportunity to learn and grow and share with others. And I know he shared with all of you in that same way.
First of all, let me say I couldn't agree more with everything that's been said about David so far today. I knew David because I hiked with him. I took every opportunity to go on a hike with him. And one of the best hikes was when he and Robert Taffanelli and I went over to Eagle's Nest. And by the way, Robert couldn't be here today. He's a dear friend of David too, and he sends by text to me his best wishes too here for this today. But here we are out in places that even Bob and I didn't know anything about, and he discovered something. I couldn't agree more with what the Tortoise Smalls were saying about David and discovery. We found some artifacts that he didn't know they were there, and somebody probably saw them someday before us, but it was something all new to us. And one of the last times I was with David, if not the last time, was a hike in Broad Canyon, Lower Broad Canyon. And there again, he discovered something that he'd never seen before, and I'd never seen before. And the group that we were didn't see before. So this always, he would always do that when I was with him. So it's something I cherish about David. And of course, we miss him.
There was no limit to David's love. And I know that really started, flowed through, grew with his incredible family. And the fact that his family and their love were so immeasurably deep let him and them share the most memorable times, experiences, and leave entire landscapes and states and regions changed forever better. And that is a testament to that love and the way that love magnified and enveloped us all and continues even in this sad time. And so every beautiful sunset, every very long day filled with stories of almost getting just close enough, it's carried by that love that David shared with all of us. And I'm so grateful to have shared in that.
I know David probably would have been a little uncomfortable with being such the focus of attention today. At the same time, I think he would be so glad to see everyone getting together, especially in this time where we haven't really seen each other in so long to catch up. And I think he would have been so glad that we're celebrating the things that he cared about. Maybe not him, he would have been uncomfortable with that, but the things that he cared about and each other and our beautiful state. There's really not a whole lot you can say about David that hasn't already been said. His joy of discovery and his passion and his smile. I think, when I first met David, we were working to establish the Organ Mountains Desert Peaks National Monument. He's relentless in his learning, as we all talked about. He was researching and getting out every weekend with Nancy and the family and friends to go find new resources to tell the stories of of our past here and our present, and finding those gifts of nature that are right in our backyard. And he'd come to the office and we would talk about these things and try and figure out what the right boundaries were and what the protections needed to be. But what really emerged really quickly, almost instantly, was David's character. And we became friends very quickly because of that. It was hard not to see what an incredible, generous, kind, and yes, very intelligent, person he was. And I think his advocacy was a gift. And I think it was, I don't know how intentional it was, but I know that he did it not only to protect the things that he cared about and found beautiful and special about our state and our world, but really to make sure that others would be able to share in that same joy of exploration, go find things for themselves. You'd go out, you'd go hiking. You never turn down a hike with David, right? And the family ever. It was always so much fun, and you'd learn and see so much. But we'd walk right by things, or I would, and he'd be like, "Oh, did you see that, wall built by the Apaches over there?" I had no idea what I was looking at. You'd find a scatter of lithics on the ground. He would pick it up, he would put it right back exactly where it was so that it could be studied, so that other people could find it. He wanted other people to be able to experience the way he saw the world, and the stories, the art, the culture, and of course, just the natural landscape. So there's so much to be said, but I'm so grateful that he was generous with his time, all of us. I know because of his leadership, he was approached to sit on various leadership bodies, but the commission was really important to him, and that's why he took that on to work with all of you. So thank you for this opportunity to really celebrate David. He's definitely missed, and I hope I know I will always think about him and learn to really respect others, and as Roberta said, really value other people's opinions and take that as a point of learning and growth as well. Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, my name is Kevin Bixby. I'm the Executive Director of the Southwest Environmental Center and Wildlife for All. And I want to thank you for carving out this time today as part of this meeting to have this tribute to David. And I want to particularly thank Roberta for doing that. When I heard about it, I obviously was not going to miss this, but I wrote some words about David just so I wouldn't forget what I wanted to say. But I realized that we're saying a lot of the same things, all of us. David touched us in the same way. But I'll just share some of my personal anecdotes in the ways that he touched me personally. First time I ever hunted was with David for turkey up in the Sacramento Mountains. He knew I was interested in hunting. I'd never been, and in typical David fashion, he invited me to come along with him and Nancy and some hunting buddies, and then spent much of the time patiently explaining to me how to do everything to a rookie, and undoubtedly at the expense of his own hunting success. And that was David. He was always generous with his time. It didn't matter if you were a friend or a stranger. And to give another example, he led many of our Southwest Environmental Center Back by Noon outings, which were Saturday morning outings to go discover some place around here, some natural or cultural feature. And our guides were volunteers, and he always agreed to do it whenever we asked him to do it. And he was very much in demand. He was one of our most popular guides. And he would, usually with Nancy, he would do it and enthusiastically share his extensive knowledge and love of the area with newcomers. And that was a passion of his. And it wasn't enough that he gave up his time on a Saturday morning to lead these outings, but he and Nancy invariably surprised the participants with rare Florida oranges or miniature flint boxes or some other totally unexpected treat. And I don't believe any of our other guides did that. It was totally above and beyond the call of duty, and that was David. And this has been mentioned before. What I treasured most and will miss most are my conversations with David. David had that rare combination of intensely inquisitive mind, a very rigorous thinker. He was very logical. You couldn't get away with stuff. He would challenge you. But he had that gentle personality and just a rare open-mindedness and willing to listen to you. He really made me feel listened to, and I know he made everybody feel that way. Talking with him was a delight. I never had a conversation with David that I did not enjoy. Our conversations were rarely scheduled and often ran for an hour or more. And I heard others say that today, and I'm wondering, how did he ever get his work done at his job? When he called, I tried to always answer the phone and make time for him because I knew it was not going to be time wasted. Our freewheeling talks usually started out about some wildlife topic, but would fluidly move on to cover a lot of other ground, including hiking Mount Whitney, backpack trips, travel to Europe, hybrid cars. Often with David cueing the segue with, "That reminds me, what do you think about?" David was genuinely interested in what I and others thought. Part of it with me was what he took his role as the conservation representative on the commission very seriously. But he was like that before he was on the commission too. We didn't always agree, of course. I never could convince him to come around on trapping, for example, but I valued his opinion immensely. Some of you know that I wrote an article with the deliberately provocative title of Why Hunting Isn't Conservation and Why It Matters. Many hunters many people couldn't get past the title and assumed it was a hit job on hunting, which it wasn't. But when I asked David to review the draft, he agreed without hesitation and provided many thoughtful comments and suggested edits, and many of which ended up in the final version. David was just a special person. He left us too soon, but he made a real difference while he was here, and he inspires me every day.
Thanks for the opportunity, and thanks for pulling this together, Roberta. Really appreciate this chance to talk about David and hear other people's thoughts. Obviously, we're all talking about the same elements of this amazing guy. I came to think about his curiosity as ferocious. He was never content to stay on the surface of an issue. He just had to drill down deeper and deeper and really get at the heart of the matter. He was, as everybody has said, so generous with his time. I probably really got to know David on a tour of the proposed Desert Peaks portion of the monument in about 2013. He took Garrett Veneklassen and me on a drive, and for 6 hours, he drove and talked and hiked and talked and talked and talked and talked. And we were astounded. I mean, and I can ask questions. You know, I'm not at all embarrassed about asking questions, so we kept the conversation going. But it just made me realize that, well, for one thing, it made me realize the depth and the breadth of his curiosity. He was curious about everything up there, and that he wanted to share that. He also invited me into that circle of friends that goes into the Sacramentos every fall and hunts what they call the gentleman's hunt, and that was a gift. That's where I got to meet his family and really got to know him much better. Last year, because of COVID, it was just David and me, and so sure enough, on the first morning, I guess, I smelled elk. And then David spotted something down in the woods, and I got up a little bit closer and closer and closer and realized that it was, just an easy shot on a cow. with a collar. And so I took a shot and dropped this cow, and I was just happy as usual, thrilled to have meat in the freezer. David was beside himself with the idea that there was a collar on this animal. And that meant like data. And he could not wait to get that collar off, to find out who it had been put on by. It was Lou Bender here at New Mexico State. And so when we got all the animal butchered and taken back, he said that he was going to take the collar in, and I said, that's great, just keep it. And so sure enough, he turns it in and talks to Lou and gets all sorts of information about this particular animal. Turns out that this cow was like 21 years old. And so it dispelled a lot of myths that I had, including that cows are tender. This was a chewy cow. But David, that was David. That was just his ferocious curiosity. And the other amazing thing about him is that he was always happy to share his thoughts, but he also wanted to know your thoughts. And he would never just let it sit there. It wasn't just being polite. He dug down. He was a rare combination of a person who was open to new thoughts, but always ready to challenge his own and other people's. I was blessed to have him as a friend, a mentor, and a co-conspirator.
Good morning. I didn't have the honor of meeting David until he was appointed to the New Mexico State Game Commission. But it seemed that almost instantaneously we became close friends, and I recognized him as the kind of person I wanted to emulate. I quickly identified him as a mentor, and we grew very close, and he was such an incredible asset to the New Mexico Wildlife Federation in providing his insight, asking the right questions. He was just a wonderful mentor in a lot of aspects. In the video that was shown, one of David's other favorite ladies mentioned his driving, and there was a time, it was April of 2020, that we went down to the Coronado National Forest. We were working on a public lands access project, and of course, April 2020, the pandemic was raging, and so we were going to do this tour of this potential new access route to the Coronado National Forest to provide public access to an area that currently is pretty inaccessible. And because of the pandemic, we were dividing up all of these side-by-side, UTV or OHVs or whatever they're called, and we didn't have enough of the off-road vehicles for everybody to be separated. And so we were trying to figure out how to address this, and David says, well, I'll just take my pickup truck. And he had this beautiful white pickup, and the range ecologist who was on the tour, he said, David, there's no way you're going to be able to get that pickup truck where we're going. We're looking at a potential place for a road, not an actual road. And he says, well, I'll just take the truck until I can't take it anymore, and then I'll stop there. And my gosh, where he took that truck, it was unbelievable. We'd get to a spot, we'd get to an arroyo or a little canyon, and the erosion it was just completely impassable. Nobody would think about taking a vehicle, an actual, vehicle designed to be on the highway on these spots. And so we'd stop the side-by-side, and I'd go back to David's truck and say, hey, David, I don't think you better try this. And he'd smile ear to ear, as Commissioner Bates said, it was an infectious smile. And he'd smile ear to ear and said, well, there's only one way to find out. And I'll tell you, David, he completed the entire tour in that truck, never got a dent or mark or scratch on it. It was the most amazing thing. But I think about that smile often, and I think about David every single day, and he's certainly missed. So thank you all very much for this opportunity, and I appreciate the chance to share that story.
Morning, everybody. My deepest condolences to the Souls family, Nancy, Keith, Kevin, Bill, Cassandra. I got to know David. Well, I've known Bill as well. I met David over a beer, and I had a short list of people to talk to, learning about this amazing landscape that he fought so hard to protect. And he was just so willing to take time and to listen and to inspire and to teach. Like, if we were all like Dave Souls, we would just be better. We would all be better off people. Just taking that time and doing what he did to, like, you could fit what I knew about public lands on a Post-it note. And David was just so willing to share that information. Remember, we had that beer and I was polishing off my second one and he's maybe finishing his small one. I was like, oh, this guy's gonna hate me. But he didn't. I left that meeting with 3 books to read, about 100 other people to talk to. And I remember we worked together on Accombach Canyon to guarantee public access for that location. When I received the call from the BLM, David was the first person I called to share that news with because he knew how important that was. He knew how critical the work that we still have to do for our national monument was. And in true David fashion, he said, okay, so what are we going to do about those areas in the Robledos? So David, I couldn't do what I do without him, and as an organization, we will carry out his mission as connecting community to public lands, because that's what he loves. And thank you, Roberta, for making this happen, and thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners, Souls family, and friends that are here today. My name is Colleen Payne. I'm the New Mexico Regional Director for the Mule Deer Foundation. David was a member of our Tri-County chapter here in Las Cruces and was always one of the first people to always buy his tickets and reserve his seats, and I greatly appreciated that. He always showed up to our events with the infectious smile on his face and was always supportive of the conservation efforts our organization was doing. Not only was he a member of the commission and helped a lot with the Oregon Mountains Desert Peaks Monument, but he helped a ton with wildlife conservation programs here in the Southwest, including a huge water development project in the Portillos Mountains that we worked very closely together on. I was always greatly appreciative of his drive for that. I met David when I was just a young pup, up and coming in the volunteer world, working with the National Wild Turkey Federation at the time as a volunteer, and from a personal standpoint, he was always supportive of a young professional coming up in this field and always was a cheerleader and supporting me on. And I always will take that for the rest of my career because he has some big shoes to fill. And his passion, his dedication, his open-mindedness is always something that I think all of us can take some characteristics from and continue his legacy. So thank you, commissioners, for doing this today and honoring Mr. Souls.
Good morning. My name's Carrie Romero. I'm the Executive Director for the New Mexico Council of Outfitters and Guides. I first met Commissioner Souls when he was appointed by the governor to the commission, and the first day I met him, I introduced myself, and as we were just lightly chatting, we discovered that I have a very dear friend who's also a very dear friend of his wife. So just overall, I felt like that first experience solidified us as friends. And over the next roughly 2 years, as we worked through issues together, I just found him to be the most sincerest of listeners. He genuinely, even though a lot of times we would come out on the other side on different sides of any policy issue, he just always seemed to really listen because he wanted to know what you knew rather than listening with a response in mind. And so I felt like I learned a lot from him about professionalism. And I mean, it's kind of the same thing that everybody has said so far, but I think the repetitive nature of all the comments just really shows what kind of character he had. And he was just a really genuinely good human being. I'm glad to have known him. Thank you.
Like many here, I idolized David, idolized him. He was a good friend and has been a good friend since the mid-90s. To the Souls family, I love you guys. I just wanted to share a really quick story with David. We were commissioned by New Mexico Magazine to write an article on petroglyphs in the Organ Mountain Desert Peaks National Monument. David would write it, I would take the photographs. We could have easily just given photographs and he could have written the article, but that wasn't David. He wanted to have a new experience. So we went out camping, and this was right when COVID had started and we weren't sure what it was all about. But David and Nancy took their own pickup, and my wife and I, we took ours, and we have a little off-road trailer that we stayed in. But Nancy and David, they sleep in the back of this truck. And there's no camper on it. It's just an open pickup, and that's how they camped. And to get this one photograph, which was up on top of a mountain, we had to hike up there at 1 in the morning. So we set our alarms. We woke up. I got in my vehicle because of COVID. David got in his. But remember, Nancy's in the back of the pickup, asleep. And in this white pickup that was glorified with New Mexico pinstriping, that every scratch on that truck had a story behind it. Anyway, he takes off, and Nancy's in the back of this truck, and we're on this 2-track road going over these baby head boulders, and she's laying back there, and I was just laughing. I mean, it was great. We get to the base of the mountain, we park, and Nancy, I know there was no way she was asleep. I mean, so hopefully she went back to sleep. David and I hiked up to the top of this mountain, and there was a petroglyph up there, this most amazing Jornada Mogollon petroglyph that David knew about, that shared with me. And we got up there, the moon was kissing the rock, and just, it was beautiful. And I took that photograph, but then we had to wait for the galactic center of the Milky Way to come around to where it was in view. So we stayed up there on that rock, laying there looking at the stars. And of course, me asking David questions, I'm so inquisitive, and he was such a brilliant man. And he taught me so much, like he taught everyone here. And I cherish all those memories, and yeah, I miss my friend so much. I miss his laugh, as we all do, and I'm just thankful for those experiences. Thank you.
I'm Bill Souls, David's older brother. David was the baby, by the way. He's the youngest. Though he had a lot more gray hair, mine's catching up quickly. But it always never quite seems fair, and many of you have talked about David. We all have the same amount of time, but it seemed like David always had extra. In that everybody has talked about hour-long conversations, spending time hiking, doing all of these different things. And the rest of us, what are we doing with our time? And I think it's not that David had more time, he just never wasted any. He was always doing something. He was expanding his mind. He was hiking with people. He was connecting with people. He was discovering new things. Many of you that have done hikes with David, trails were not his friend. David would go, it's like, oh yeah, the trail goes that way, but it's shorter if we just go this direction. And he'd go bushwhacking. And there are times I've slid down slopes with him and through the briars and multiple other things because David wanted to discover something new, something different. And many times he'd come back from his weekend hikes out in the Organ Mountain Desert Peaks with new photographs of bedrock mortars, of petroglyphs, of things, and call up the BLM and say, do you know about this? And he'd have the coordinates for it, and they didn't have it on their maps yet. And so many of the things they have on the maps are because David discovered them. David was trained as a physicist, and an engineer, but he was really a historian. Much of the history of this area, David has put together. And if you never got to see his slideshow of the history of the trails and the petroglyphs and all of the things out in the Organ Mountain Desert Peaks, you really missed out. And I don't know if anyone ever filmed that or made an archive of that, but David was an incredible storyteller. He was a storyteller. He made you laugh. He sucked you into it. I never wanted the stories to end. And as a state senator, David made me a better senator. He was my go-to person on conservation issues, on hunting issues, and also about all kinds of other things, because David was inquisitive about everything. And he often would call me up as he was a game commissioner, asking me about, okay, so explain to me again how things actually get passed in the legislature, because it's not common to most people. And so we had multiple long conversations about legislation, about politics, about issues. And David hated politics, but he was really good at it. And those of you, when he got onto the Game Commission, I teased him one time and said, I thought you didn't like politics. You are getting onto one of the most political commissions and boards in the state of New Mexico, whether you like it or not. But again, he never made it political. He made it about getting things done. And where today is really a tribute to my brother David, it really is for us. He would have been embarrassed by all the attention. He would never have asked for this. But it's about us. It's about us healing. And so if you take anything away from today, live your life full, and every day try and make it better for the people, the land, the animals. That's what David would want. So thank you.
Everyone stand, we're going to have the color guard.
Thank you, everybody. We really appreciate it.
Wow. Commissioner, thank you for a very, very beautiful presentation. I know you put a lot of time and work in putting this together. I want to start off by saying thank you.
Can we take a 10-minute break?
Let me finish. I want to say thank you to the family and the friends, everybody that spoke here today. That was a tremendous tribute to a very great man. And yes, it is a very touching morning that we've had. I think we are all very, very blessed for our lives in David's souls. So with that said, I have like about 10:26 on my phone, on my watch. Can we take a 10-minute break? Or I would say even a 15, but we have a lot to cover. So let's say 10 minutes. And so thank you, everyone. This meeting will come back to order. It is now 10:46. Commissioners, I again thank you for a wonderful morning. I think it might be best to go on the record and acknowledge that we will need to take a lunch break. And my recommendation is that we go through the agenda And maybe around 12 o'clock, we break for lunch for maybe about an hour, if that's okay with everyone. I'm looking for nods. I think I'm getting some nods. So very good. Let's move on to our next agenda item number 6, which is the general public comments. And for those of you that are on live stream here, I think you know that our agenda is on the Department of Game and Fish website. And so please follow along if possible. Department of Game and Fish, I don't have any cards here, general public comments. I did receive a nice letter this morning, and I'm happy to invite people to the microphone, but I think the protocol in the past has been cards.
Madam Chair, it appears we do not have anyone interested in general public comment at this time.
Well, frankly, there I see a card coming. I'd like to keep this meeting as, if we could, somewhat informal. We'll continue with the protocol and the formality that we normally have, but if we could just, if somebody wants to come to the microphone. Wonderful. Joel Gray, if you could please come to the microphone. We would be happy to hear from you this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Joel Gay. I'm here on behalf of the New Mexico chapter of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. And I was hoping to stick around myself for the open gate review, but I've got a medical emergency back in Albuquerque that I'd like to get going on. So I just wanted to say that we have always supported the open gate program, but think it's moved way too slowly over the last, well, as long as it's been around. We don't think the Department of Game and Fish has adequately chased down funding for it to try and beef it up, build it up into a really robust program. It should be a big program in New Mexico, and it's not. And so I'm looking forward to hearing Stuart's update on how the program is going. But my guess is that it's still limping along like it has for years. And I would just ask the commission to take that into account in the coming year to try and make that a higher priority for the Department of Game and Fish. Thank you.
Do we have anyone else? I think we do. Commissioners, we do not. No, we do not. Okay. So that said, let's move on to agenda item number 7, the off-highway vehicle program. Chief Lance Cherry, if you could, we look forward to your presentation. But if it's not Chief Lance Cherry, who might it be?
Madam Chair, this is Matt Seidel. I am the OHV Program Manager for the Department of Game and Fish, and I'll be standing in for Chief Cherry. So to give you a brief history, we got to go back to the early 2000s when there was a few high-profile accidents that prompted public awareness and legislative action. In 2005, the OHV Act was signed into law. It is a Chapter 66 law, which means it does reside in the New Mexico Motor Vehicle Code. Originally, when the act was signed, the authority was given to the Tourism Department and our OHV Safety Board, and the Trail Safety Fund was created. The Trail Safety Fund gets its money from revenue from registration, user fees, grants, and donations. Registrations are registrations from New Mexicans, and user fees are pretty much registrations paid by the non-residents, and I'll talk a little bit more in the following slides about that. With little success in the tourism department, 2009, the OHV Act was amended, and this amendment gave the authority to the New Mexico Department of Game and Fish over the act, as well as the Trail Safety Fund. They also created, the act during this amendment created an OHV advisory board that consists of 7 civilian members that are appointed by the governor to 2-year terms. In the OHV Act, there are 19 powers and duties outlined for the department to do, things like adopt and promulgate rules, develop management plan, create a grant system, create a statewide OHV safety education and OHV law enforcement strategy. That has been implemented. Even though that the act was amended in 2009, the New Mexico Department of Game and Fish in 2010 started the OHV program. I'm actually the 3rd OHV program manager. And the Trail Safety Fund is where the OHV program gets its annual budget. We get just a little over $795,000 for our fiscal year, which runs obviously from July 1 to the end of the following June. In the act, it stipulates and requires that at least 50% of the money shall be devoted to OHV law enforcement and education, and no more than 30% can be used for administrative overhead. When there is money available, the department offers 2 sorts of grants that entities can apply for. Law enforcement grants and non-law enforcement grants. Law enforcement grants is money given to those agencies that want to enforce OHV codes, the laws, and the non-law enforcement grants could be any entity that wants to do restoration or maintenance or building of trails, OHV trails. If they have a signage project, stuff like this would be those non-law enforcement grants. A maximum per grant that can be awarded is $15,000. And the problem is these grants, when awarded, are only valid for the fiscal year. So they have just a year time frame to get their project completed. We do start advertising these applications and instructions for these grants mid-November, and it goes through the end of March. Talking about registrations that go back to the Trail Safety Fund, whether there's an OHV user, whether they're a non-resident or a resident of the state of New Mexico, those machines have to be currently registered in order to be used on public lands, and they have to have that registration visible or displayed on the actual machine. Also, when they're on public lands, the other thing, the next thing that an officer would be looking for is if they have a current spark arrestor, not to start any kind of fires. For the residents, we work with New Mexico Taxation and Revenue Department quite a lot, but all New Mexico residents have to go through MVD Motor Vehicle Division to get their registration. It's a 2-year registration for any of their OHVs, whether it's an ATV, a side-by-side, and it costs up to $53. They are also able to get the $7 on paved road registrations for those localities that have passed an ordinance to make driving OHVs on pavement legal. But an ordinance has to be passed. Non-residents actually can buy these user fee decals or registrations through the New Mexico Department of Game and Fish. We're the only ones that do it for the non-residents. They have an option of buying a 90-day user fee for $18 or a 2-year one for $48. They also have the option for the $7 on pavement or on paved roads license. We do show reciprocity to several other states. There's actually 16 states that we do not show reciprocity. Some of those are listed, Florida, Tennessee, Alabama, but the other 34 states we definitely show reciprocity because they have a system much like New Mexico has. And any of the money that is generated from these user fees that we collect in the department, 71% of that money goes back to New Mexico Taxation and Revenue Department because there's a breakdown. So much goes to the beautification fund or their suspense fund or operating fund. And all of the $7 for the on-paved road registrations goes back to New Mexico Tax and Revenue. So with that being said, another big portion of the statute or the OHV Act is whenever we look at the penalties for individuals who are out using their OHVs on public lands, and some of these violations that they may be doing, that an officer may pull them over and write them some citations. The act really outlines and establishes penalties into 4 classes of violations, and really can be enforced by any law enforcement officer in the state of New Mexico. Any PD, sheriff, state police, game warden can enforce these laws, since they are out of the motor vehicle code. All these penalties are considered penalty assessment misdemeanors, and each one under the act has a certain dollar amount associated. So if you look to the class 3 violation, operating OHV without an approved spark arrestor, any magistrate court in the state will have a penalty assessment of $157. Now, if an individual in a 3-year period of time gets a second or third or subsequent violation, they actually get the next class higher violation. So if you look at that same violation for the $157 and go to the next column, that's when it becomes the $257 amount for a second or third violation in that 3-year period. What you'll also recognize is that amount is equal to the first violation of a class 4 violation. Now, the difference in a class 4 violation is there's not a violation class higher than that. So the statute requires that an additional $200 gets tacked on for a second or third citation, subsequent citation that they receive. And so those are the penalties that anyone would be looking at. And like I said, any PD, sheriff, or state officer can issue these citations. So it is our mission to provide education and outreach of the laws pertaining to OHV use to the public. We implement a statewide safety education program that promotes safe and environmentally responsible OHV recreation and a respect for private property. We encourage responsible use of our public lands, use that leaves the land healthy and unspoiled, that protect our traditional uses, customs, culture, wildlife, habitat, and allows for the continued enjoyment of these lands for our families and future generations. I will entertain any questions that you may have, and thank you for having me today.
That was a very good presentation. Do you want to speak a little bit about communications? I personally like to turn on the radio first thing in the morning, 770 KKOB. I hear some wonderful ads from the Department of Game and Fish. So speak to us a little bit more about how, no pun intended, you're tooting your horn.
Madam Chair, thank you very much. Yes, we've last year and this year, we've really kind of upped our advertisements in the radio field, especially for guys like me who are a little older, a little more analog thinking. I listen to the radio, but there are also these generations before me that even when I was talking to my boss, my immediate supervisor, a lot of his kids, they don't turn on the TV, they don't listen to the radio. So we've been doing a huge digital campaign, but what we're really trying to press right now is those hot topics that we see or we hear about from any of our law enforcement officers or supervision. If there's a lot of issues with the misunderstanding of paved road use, so we'll have commercials about the paved road, illegal use of paved roads in some areas. We always are required to push the message for OHV trainings, especially for youth operators, from that 6-year-old to 17-year-old. They have to have an OHV safety certificate and show proof. So whenever they go on our public lands and our officers ask for these safety certificates that they have it, they're also required by law to wear a safety helmet and safety goggles that don't shatter. So a lot of our advertisements are kind of our meat and potatoes of what the statute really requires and pushes that safety aspect and what is required out there, especially what our officers are seeing out in the field.
Okay, very good. And you're also using social media, YouTube videos. I know somebody that I was speaking with recently made a reference to the YouTube video, so that's good too, yes?
Madam Chair, that is correct. We actually had, Tristana has actually done quite a job for us last year on all the social media outfits. We also had Sunny 505 last year do some of our digital advertisements. This year, we're actually working on a big package with Cumulus, and they're supposed to be starting a lot of their digital advertisements. And right now, we're kind of borrowing a lot of what we did last year to get them caught up for their different forms. And through that digital advertisement, they said that package was just under 300,000 people that they're looking to be able to contact on their forums. So we thought that was advantageous and decided to push forward with it.
Do we track violations? Do you keep records, statistics on violations? I love your mission statement, by the way. You know, it's always important to know what we want to accomplish. And education, implementation through that, but responsibility. We have our law enforcement, our game warden here, Colonel Griego and his fine staff. And so how do you integrate OHV and work with law enforcement on that?
Madam Chair, excellent question. Actually, I have an officer, Desi Ortiz, he's my law enforcement coordinator. He coordinates a lot of that in between field operations and what the OHV program does. Officer Ortiz, all citations funnel through him because he's the liaison with Motor Vehicle Division. Just in case an individual gets a citation and they do not pay it, their driver's license will get suspended. And that's usually when Officer Ortiz gets a phone call from a civilian and say, hey, look, I need to pay the citation, where's it at? Because I need to get my driver's license, or whatever the case may be. But we actually try to not only give our officers equipment, ATVs, side-by-sides, where they can keep up with those civilians that have those ATVs and side-by-sides. Because being an officer for 20 years trying to chase an ATV that could go 360 degrees in a department vehicle is not a right tool to do that. They'll leave you in the dust. So trying to get them the appropriate equipment. Every year when funds are available, we try to give them OHV overtime. In fact, we just approved $30,000 for the officers to use specifically for OHV patrols, OHV law enforcement, or even OHV training, because that is beneficial as well. If they want to teach some kids how to drive an ATV, that's awesome. So yeah, I keep in constant contact with the majors, Major Duff and Major Sanchez, quite a bit, and try to find out what their needs are, let them know what our needs are, because we also present this information to our OHV advisory board, and sometimes they have concerns, and so we just try to keep those lines of communication all the time, whether it's email, in person, phone call, and it seems to be working really well.
Excellent answer. Commissioners, do any of you have questions? Yes, Commissioner Lopez.
Madam Chair. I have one question, sir. Do you know which municipalities have enacted on-pave use in the state? Or if there's a place I can look?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Lopez, we actually are keeping a list. Now, understand the law doesn't require those entities to invite us to that table when they pass it, so a lot of it's word of mouth. I don't have that list with me right now, but if you go to our department webpage under OHV or beforeyouright.com and go to the law enforcement section where it shows the laws and regulations, there's actually a running list that we're keeping for all the counties that have currently passed an ordinance, as well as all the municipalities that have passed one. Now, whenever we tell a lot of our customers here's a list, we want to look at it to see if it's there for like Red River, for example. Yes, Red River's there. We tell them, yeah, go ahead and read and stuff, but hey, give Red River a call to make sure that maybe last year they didn't change that ordinance a little bit, because you want to make sure you want to be in their, abiding by their law, their specific ordinance. But that's where we're trying to keep a running list, especially as we hear about them.
Okay. The reason I asked, because I saw one in Santa Fe at Market Street a couple of weeks ago and had the tag on it. That was news to me, so pretty cool. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Commissioner?
Matt, I want to thank you and Lance and Desi and everybody who's chosen to engage with the community that are having really big issues with ATV use on public lands. The last meeting that we attended with you all, your willingness to be open about the limitations on what the law allows you to do, both monetarily and in law enforcement, was pretty eye-opening. I will make a comment and say that I'm pretty disappointed that we only have 1 to 2 advisory board members ever show up to these meetings. But I'm confident that the game department already has the rules in place. They have the program pretty well solidified, so you can keep doing what you're doing in the manner that you're doing. It's important that that the group that has been trying to push or will be pushing for change in this law, that you all still keep connected, and so there's going to be people here that will talk about it. But I think one of the things that was pretty eye-opening to me is the fact that 71% of the user fees are going to the Tax and Rev Department. And I'm going to encourage the groups that have been advocating for changing this law to make it a little better. I think that's truly an unfair ratio. I think the department, who is the only people out there right now providing any sort of law enforcement, because the truth of the matter, one of the things I learned was local sheriffs and state police, this is such a weenie kind of law enforcement effort for them that they generally don't engage, and they just kind of leave it to you to take the heat for pulling anybody over, if you can get them to pull over. So what do you see a need for more funds, more revenue to be able to do more to increase not only public safety, but to minimize habitat damage out in the forest?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Salazar Henry, I couldn't agree with you more. I've always told everyone I've talked to that it would be nice to, one, make sure that the Trail Safety Fund is protected, left alone, not raided like it has been in the past. Secondly, to actually have access to all the funding in the Trail Safety Fund when it's there. If that's only $700,000 that year or $2 million the next year, to have that complete access of it, so we could really expand this program. We get, compared to like Colorado and Arizona quite a bit, and it's really unfortunate because there's really just 3 employees in the OHV program, and we work with a lot of the officers. But it would be nice to have 12 of our own OHV officers, like Officer Desi Ortiz, that we can be more effective. So we get calls of any kind of habitat destruction, big weekends, then we can just go and camp out and educate some people. And then if we have to write some citations, write some citations. But I think we're just majorly understaffed. And if we had more funds, we had more opportunities, because a lot of times when you work with the Forest Service, they have one officer for that Forest Service, and it may be 1,100 square miles that they have to patrol, but yet they're dealing with $1 million violations or $2 million violations. And they're like, yeah, we'll get to these other ones, but right now I'm over here. So I couldn't agree with you more, and I would say yes, absolutely, more funding so we could do more.
The other thing that I think has been pretty eye-opening, or I really support the need for education, educating the folks. To me, it's like having to have a driver's license. You ought to be certified in being able to control and use and know the rules for OHV use. And so I was wondering, has anybody ever considered making OHV education mandatory in the same manner we do Hunter Ed, before somebody can get on an OHV, especially kids? Because we know this law started because of the loss of children that we were having on ATV accidents. So has anybody ever brought that up in any other state that maybe is doing this, that requiring education before you can own an ATV or an OHV license?
Well, here in New Mexico, I know that we require it if they're going to be using on public lands, but it's not necessarily a requirement. Excuse me, Madam Chair, I apologize. Madam Chair, Commissioner Roberta Salazar Henry. I would like to see kind of a blanket requirement here in our state, whether you're going to be using it on private property or not, if you're going to use it, especially in that youth category from 6 to 17, because a lot of this law, there are exceptions to like registrations and stuff. If you're using the OHV on private land, if you're using it for agriculture purposes. And so a lot of people may allow their kid because they're going to go check on the horses and ride down the highway. But I would love to see a blanket law for, especially for those youths from that 6 to 17 with those youth models that are out there and have that ability to make sure that education is there. Right now, we have a pretty big education strategy, and we implement, whether it's public outreach, whether we do the hands-on training, the online training, and we try to engage kids at their schools before COVID with a bunch of little robotic Safety Sam, Safety Sarah on a little ATV to get them engaged, get them interested, get them to ask those questions, and then maybe get them into our classes that they could do it, because it's very eye-opening when you're talking to the audience of kids of 200 to 300 kiddos, and you ask them, how many of you guys ridden OHVs or ATV, and 50 of them raise their hands. Well, how many of you guys ever done it on public land? No one's raising their hands. How many of you guys know about, you need to get certified if you're going to be on public land? So nobody raised their hand. So it's really eye-opening that we're missing a population that we've been addressing before COVID anyway.
Well, it seems to me like the dealers of the state should be really partnering up with trying to get the safety aspect and education aspect done. So I'm going to let it go. I've got a lot of personal issues with just how much needs to be done in order to actually make this law something that it should be, I think, and what the legislature intended. And we have so many conflicts right now with our hunters and with OHV weekenders that are just using it for fun. There's so many conflicts, it's unbelievable, and so we need to do something. So I appreciate all the hard work you guys are doing, and the field operations staff who are picking up the ball, and that $30,000 a year in overtime doesn't really make up for missing your family or any of the other things, and running into people that are just jerks when you do pull them over. So I appreciate it, and I'll just leave it at that. Thank you, Matt.
Matt, thank you. It was a really informative presentation, and yeah, thanks for everything you're doing with this too. Are we able to put money from the Trail Safety Fund towards restoration and rebuilding barriers and things on illegal roads? Is that part of the fund?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Vesbach, actually, yes, we can actually do that. Whether we get capital outlay money or someone actually applies for the grant, we could do some of those projects. The unfortunate thing about that Trail Safety Fund money, since it's a fiscal year, and it seems the timeline is always off with like, let's say, Forest Service, trying to get someone to do something in that fiscal year without running out of time to get the money spent tends to be somewhat of a hurdle. But we always allow that money. They could get up to $15,000 this year. They could apply next year, get another $15,000, to do some of that. We're currently working with Santa Fe County. They have some issues right out of Espanola with a lot of people riding the irrigation ditches and breaking some of those dams, those dirt dams that would hold back water if there ever got a flood. So right now we've been doing up some signage and we see this as a several-year thing, so we can definitely do that.
Okay. And does the commission have the ability to increase the registration fee on either residents or non-residents? I think the statute was up to, and then the commission, do we have that authority?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Vesbach, I'm not 100% sure on that, but I could get back to you with an answer on that.
Okay, thank you. I may be wrong, but I had an understanding that there was an up to, and it had not been set at that high fee. But I do agree it would be nice to have the whole fund too, and not have so much of it unavailable. There's such a need out there. A similar question about rentals. I mean, out of Red River and some of those other places now, boy, you just see so much use of ATV rentals where people are coming in just going all over the place. What's the situation with the fees on those rentals? How does that work?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Vespa, it's a little different for all those. What we look on our side is we make sure that those rental companies, have the certified training for OHV safe operations, that they are following a protocol to also convey that information and have that safety training for those people that they're taking out. They are wearing their safety helmets, their safety goggles. So we see them on that, the front end. But as far as what they're making and how they're operating financially, we don't know very much. At least I don't know very much about it.
Okay. And for a registration fee, though, are they just paying an in-state registration fee for the ATV itself?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Vesbach, it's yes and no. Whether it's a company out of state, they may be going through us to purchase those user fees. There's also some that are New Mexico residents and they're going through MVD.
Okay.
But also, there's also an advocate, they may be getting a machine out of Colorado that has a Colorado registration on it that's valid. Since we show reciprocity, we give them a thumbs up and say, you could definitely use that in the state on public land.
Okay, thank you. And I guess last question is, in the Habitat Protection Act, this is off from the OHV Act, so it may not be something that you're familiar with, but we have, I think it's called the Habitat Protection Act and statute, where the commission can work with, or the department can work with the Forest Service and do areas, habitat protection areas that are closed. I think there's one up in Unit 49 that I know of. Is that something that I guess, how does that tie in, creating these, department being able to designate these habitat protection areas and know that they are in fact closed zones for ATV usage and, important core areas for wildlife habitat? Is that something we still have done in recent years, or do you know anything about that?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Vespa, I guess I do not know too much about the habitat protection. On our side of the aisle, give you a perfect example, the Forest Service will actually have designated trails, depending on whether it's a single track for a dirt bike or something that fits an ATV or a side-by-side. And it's a motor vehicle use map, and those designations will actually show what is open, and a lot of our officers use those as well. So if they're they find a person that is not on a designated trail, that would be an obvious violation. There are some areas like BLM or Forest Service that actually have closed areas, and it'll be designated as no motorized use, even though there may be a spider web of trails in there. That's usually a red flag that, one, you can't be there and there's a violation. But as far as that aspect, that's what I'm aware of.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
And turn on the mic. I'm going to remove my mask while I talk because I think it's easier for you all to hear me. I think my voice is a little muffled and I tend to have a high-pitched voice. So I want to apologize to you all commissioners, to the department, and to the members of the public. I just noticed an error in the agenda, and I did ask the director to look into it. And it was not on the website. And so I'm hoping that the Assistant Attorney General Greg Smithkeer is listening in, because part of this question will be directed at him. But I had hoped that we would have the director's report on the agenda. There is too much stuff going on in the department, and when I say stuff going on in the department, it's good stuff. We always need to hear things behind the scene. And that director's report I've been putting on the agendas for, all of these committee meetings, or commission meetings. So, that said, it would have followed after this agenda item. And I don't know, commissioners, how you feel if we could squeeze in the director's report either now before we go into the fur-bearing rule hearing, which is agenda item 8 that I think is published, or we put it into the next general public comments, which is agenda item number 13. And I want to say thank you to two persons that have submitted cards and material, Mark Allison and, of course, dear friend Jesse Dubell. We have this ready for the general public comments. So, commissioners, your thoughts, and then before we hear from the Assistant Attorney General, I'm going to look to you, Vice Chair.
Yeah, I would say first off, we typically have general public comments on each agenda item, so we should probably close that out and allow the people to comment. And then, personally, I would support a director's report in the general public comment section, I think, if our Assistant AG thinks that's, okay. But I'm open to whatever. I don't know that we, but I think first we should close out this agenda item and then maybe talk about it.
Commissioner, are you nodding your head, and other Commissioner Lopez too?
Well, I would like to make some comments on creating a new agenda item.
Sure.
But I agree, we need to finish this. I was concerned that Matt wandered off and we haven't finished this presentation unless we have.
I thought it was closed out, I'm sorry.
Oh, I didn't know it was. Okay. Well, I believe we should follow the law, and whatever the AG says is legal. That's what I'm doing, because I don't think I've ever seen where you could just add an agenda item without it being published within the 3 days, I believe. So we'd be violating our own policy.
I don't think
that we
would be.
adopted. So I would just rather hear from the AG, and if he thinks it's hunky-dory to add anything at any time, okay.
Well, Commissioner, I know that in past meetings, we have revised what's posted with the 72 hours in the meeting. The purpose of the agenda item review and approval of the minute of the agenda is to make any particular modification.
Yeah, and we didn't at the time.
Exactly.
And so that's why I just want a legal opinion about, because I don't want to break the law or violate our policy.
Absolutely, I agree. So, Assistant Attorney General Greg Smithkeer, are you online?
I am here, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Because it's not an action item, I would normally say that it's okay to add it to the agenda, but the agenda's already been approved.
Right.
And so I would say, yeah, I would stick to the approved agenda at this point.
So, Assistant Attorney General, would you say that the director can speak during the general public comments?
If no action is taken on what is said by the director, then I think it would be okay.
Okay, very good. So then let's, I think that's very clear.
Madam Chair, if I may, I believe those two cards that you have are in fact for this particular agenda item, the OHV one. I apologize if that wasn't clear.
It was not clear in the material that was presented to me, and I confused it with a piece of paper that was handed at the beginning of the meeting. So my apologies to Mark Allison. So we have not left, thank you, sir, agenda item number 7, off-highway vehicle program overview. So I would like to call, in the order in which I received this, Mark Allison. Would you please come forward to the microphone? Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Do anything special? Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Mark Allison, I'm the Executive Director of New Mexico Wild. I did want to thank you again for the time spent to the tribute to David Souls. That was really special and meaningful and well-deserved. And I appreciate the attention the Commission's giving to this issue as well. I wanted to underscore a letter that we sent in June along with the New Mexico Wildlife Federation, Conservation Voters of New Mexico, and other groups representing thousands of New Mexicans who really feel this is a great concern and the illegal OHV use is causing tremendous and growing damage on our public lands, especially our forests and BLM land. We were able to subsequently meet, thanks to Commissioner Salazar Henry, with the staff and advisory board members, and we really appreciated that time. Thought it was a fruitful conversation, and we look forward to continuing those. The letter, I just wanted to highlight a couple things that we asked for. We certainly support more robust education around the state. We think that's an important component. Also, as Commissioner Vesbach mentioned, if we could find ways to better utilize the trail fund dollars towards signage, barriers, gates, things like that, that would be helpful. But I really wanted to underscore some of the enforcement issues too. We want to make sure that the enforcement officers have the tools and resources that they need to do their job. There's also a concern that the fees are so low that they don't really provide a disincentive to illegal behavior. So we'd like to work with you all to figure out how to address that. Our organizations are happy to invest additional time and resources working with you all on rulemaking, legislation if needed, finding additional resources. But this is something that we're paying attention to and greatly concerned about. Also wanted to, I guess, flag if the commission could encourage the governor to consider making additional appointments to the OHV Advisory Board, that would be helpful as well. So thank you again. We stand ready to support you. Look forward to more conversations, and we'll be paying attention. Thanks.
Next up, Jesse Dubell, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the commission. I just have a couple of points of information, and this is for the department, the commission, as well as attendees who are watching online. I just would like to mention that the Lincoln National Forest Plan process is currently underway, and the draft plan has been released. And the New Mexico Wildlife Federation attended some public meetings that the National Forest Service held to talk about the draft plan. And the vast majority of comments that were made during these meetings by the general public, primarily hunters, was frustration about illegal OHV use in the Lincoln National Forest. So it is a very serious issue, and New Mexico hunters are very frustrated with the situation. One other thing, though, that I wanted to mention is there's language in the Lincoln National Forest draft plan that talks about snow machines. And it indicates that snow machines should be allowed to be used in the Lincoln National Forest anywhere that snow depths are adequate, that's not wilderness. And the New Mexico Wildlife Federation takes great issue with that. We strongly believe that the snow machines should be limited to designated trails and roads that are specific for motorized vehicle travel. And so we're engaging with the agency. We're working with the National Forest, submitting our comments to try to ensure that the final plan addresses that. But I just wanted to bring that to the attention of people who are watching this meeting, as well as the commission and the department. So thank you all very much.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Commissioner.
Before we leave this agenda item, Vice Chair Vesbach brought up a really good point about the Habitat Protection Act in Chapter 17, and specifically 1763 allows the commission to identify areas where we should restrict motor vehicle use. We can also identify areas where we say it's great to set aside this place for this type of vehicle use. So I would really like to ask the director to work with the field operations staff and Stuart and whoever else that would be involved in this to really look at this act and get with Matt Seidel and those folks and the Wilderness Alliance and all the other groups that have written to us that have pinpointed areas of great concern, and see if there is a way for us to use the Habitat Protection Act to address some of those areas that are just being torn up right now. We don't have any money set aside to just go in and fix things, so maybe we need to figure out just really what is the damage going on in those public lands areas, work with the land use agency and see if we can get some agreement for some resting areas. Is that doable, Director Sloan?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Salazar Henry, yes, we certainly can get together and identify those areas. It's clear from the statute that that will require engaging with those public land management areas and getting their sign off on it. But certainly we're happy to have those conversations, especially as it relates to their forest management planning efforts.
Clear as mud, Matt? Thank you. I appreciate everybody's patience with my questions.
And I do consider that to be some comments and questions. Yes, thank you, Vice Chair, for raising the issue. And it's good to hear the Commissioner and the Director follow up on that. It's not an action item, but it's a very good discussion, and I think it's a very clear path forward as to what can be done for improvement. Okay?
Madam Chair, if I may add one more.
Okay.
Yeah. Director, do you know if is the department preparing comments on the Lincoln Forest Plan?
Madam Chair, Vice Chair Vesbach, yes.
Okay, great. Well, I would just, for the record, say I hope we're addressing that snowmobile issue. Sounds important when we hopefully ever have enough snow.
Madam Chair, Vice Chair, I was going to check on that as well.
Terrific, thank you.
Commissioners? Commissioners, are we ready to move on off this agenda item? Excellent. Thank you, sir, for your patience with us. Okay, now we are ready to move on to the next item. Chief Stuart Lively of Fur Bearer Rule Hearing, Section 19.32.2. If we are ready to proceed on this. This hearing will please come to order. My name is Sharon Salazar Hickey, Chair to the Commission. I will be serving as the hearing officer and be advised by the Commission's counsel from the Office of the Attorney General. The purpose of this hearing is for the Commission to receive public comment on amending the Fur Bearers Rule, Title 19, Chapter 32, Part 2 of the New Mexico Administrative Code, which will become effective on April 1st, 2022. These hearings are being conducted in accordance with the provisions of the Game and Fish Act and the State Rules Act. These hearings are being audio taped and video recorded. Anyone interested in a copy of the audio tape or video recording should contact Tristana Bickford with the Game and Fish Department. Public notice of this hearing was advertised in the New Mexico Register, the New Mexico Sunshine Portal, and on the department's website. Copies of the proposed amendments have been available on the department's website. Those wishing to comment here today must have registered to submit comments on the Zoom webinar platform. So, the rule hearing will be conducted in the following manner. Staff will present pre-filed exhibits. Exhibits admitted into evidence are available for review by the public on the department's website. After all exhibits are entered, we will proceed to the presentation of the proposed rule, after which testimony will be taken from the audience. Participants are asked to raise their hand in the Zoom webinar platform and wait until they are called upon to speak. In order to ensure that the hearing is accurately recorded, only one person at a time shall be allowed to speak. Any person recognized to speak is asked to identify yourself by name and who you are affiliated with for the record each time you are recognized, and two, speak loudly and clearly to accurately record your comments. After a person has offered comment, they will stand for questions from me, the hearing officer. The audience may also ask questions of anyone offering comments after being recognized by me. These hearings are not subject to judicial rules of evidence. However, in the interest of efficiency, I reserve the right to limit any testimony deemed irrelevant, redundant, or unduly repetitious. The commission may discuss the proposed new rule after the public comment portion of the hearing. Final commission action, including adoption of the rule, may occur after the conclusion of the presentation and public comment period of each hearing. This hearing is now open. Are there any exhibits for the proposed amendments to 19.32.2 for the record?
Madam Chair, I wish to enter 6 exhibits into the record. Exhibit number 1, the notice of the rulemaking. Exhibit number 2, the initial proposed rule that was posted on our website and being proposed today. Exhibit number 3, the presentation being given by myself today. Exhibit 4, the summary of the proposed changes. Exhibit 5, the technical information we relied upon to develop the rule. And Exhibit 6, the 1 public comment received during the rulemaking process.
Thank you, sir. Would anyone like to comment on the proposed amendments to 19.32.2? Commissioner?
Madam Chair, if I may, maybe I'll give my presentation first, and then after that, maybe open up for commissioners if that works.
Thank you, Chief Lively. That was very good. Are there any exhibits from the public that need to be entered into the record at this time? Very good. Exhibits 1 through 6 are admitted into the record. Thank you. Those that are registered, let us proceed.
So, Madam Chair, as we mentioned at the last commission meeting, this is to align 1932-2, which is the Furbar rule, with recent changes, statutory changes that happened during the last legislative session that prohibited the use of traps on public land. All this rule does is define public land, the same definition that's used in the statute, and then closes trapping on public lands, the use of traps on public lands, according to the statute, and allows the same exemptions as the statute has. So it's just a couple line changes, again, to align it to this and conform to the statutory changes that were made during this legislative session. When I developed this presentation late the other day, we didn't have a public comment, but like I said, during the exhibits, we did receive 1 public comment late on the night of the 20th. That was included in the record. It was just a comment basically stating that they recognized that it did align with what the statute was, and more of a comment on seeking to see how the process of enforcement occurs later. So it wasn't necessarily a comment on the proposed changes as much as how enforcement will occur after the fact. And with that, I would take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Chief Lively. Commissioner?
Chief Lively, I guess I'm still pretty ignorant about the rulemaking process, because it seems like we have had such a short public comment options, because it seemed in the past you would open the rule, you'd go out for public comment, you come back and update us, and then you go back out for public comment. Can you tell me how long this has been posted for public comment? Did we do something slightly different? I'm assuming that we're all kosher with the law. It's just different than what we've been experienced before.
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the commission. So this was posted for over 30, it was probably 45 days. So statute requires at least 30-day comment period. So it was noticed properly according to the rules in your all's rulemaking act. So you're fine there. With these rules that are basically what I would consider technical fixes, or fixes that align with statutory changes that really don't have much of a substantive change to the rule that you all will have the opportunity to make the decisions on. We typically, if we're not receiving any comments, will proceed with a 2-meeting instead of 3 meetings. If there's a lot of public comment that changes the scope of the rule, while you all are in the process of making it, we typically will have 3 meetings on those. So that's why a lot of these other rules you'll see will propose initial ideas to the commission that we look for guidance on, are we on the right path? Or if we want different direction from the commission on input on that, take that back out to the public, have meetings, bring back a rule that we think is a final rule for you to consider. Take that the last time the commission has discussions on it, and then post that thinking that that will be the final rule. Again, because this is a technical rule or a technical change in nature, no comments really received on it. That's why it was a 2 meeting instead of 3.
Thank you, Chief Lally. That makes, I feel a little more comfort in what I'm doing today. But I do have a question about what is not in this rule. And one of the trickiest part I thought that was going to be was how to enforce, or not enforce, how to deal with the Native American exemption in this rule for trapping on public lands. I'm concerned that there is nothing in this rule that identifies the process that I don't know how, I don't know why it's not here. And
Madam Chair, Commissioner Salazar Henry, so in the rule, if you'll see in the, when it's closes to public land, it'll say except as provided by that statute where it's the certain exemptions. In that exemption, where you're referring to is for trapping on public lands by Native Americans, tribes, or Pueblos, or Pueblo members for religious purposes, in consultation with Indian Affairs, Department of Indian Affairs. We have consulted with Department of Indian Affairs on what is appropriate to determine membership. And so Indian Affairs felt like it's not, or shouldn't be put in a rule because every tribe, Pueblo, and nation across the country is very different on how to determine membership. And their recommendation to us was in our FurBear rules and regulation book to put in what would qualify as documentation that you actually are a member. So instead of having that in rule, because it changes from different tribes, Pueblos, and nations across the country, their recommendation was to put it in the RIB. So that's why you don't see a strict list in rule or a procedure in rule as well.
so that'll be negotiated from change to change, or with different tribes, or?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Salazar.
I guess I'm trying to get to, do they seek a permit, an exception from you before they go out? Or when they're buying a trapping license for, I'm assuming they still buy a trapping license for public land.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Salazar Henry, so the FurBear license will still be required.
Okay.
Now, the FurBear license allows you to still trap on public land, or excuse me, on private land, allows you to call and shoot FurBears on public land. So the rule is only prohibiting the device.
Okay.
So it's not prohibiting or a licensure issue, it's a device prohibition. So we are in discussions with Indian Affairs on how best to, if it's a certification before the fact or carry papers after the fact, and working with them to feel what working with the tribes on how best to work
No, my
through that
question
process.
was, do they have to buy a trapper license? A
Madam
FurBear
Chair,
license?
Commissioner Salazar Henry, yes.
Yes, okay, yeah. And so you guys will figure out how that process is, because I know there was a lot of concern about the sensitivity and just pulling somebody over and saying, trying to determine whether they should be setting those traps legally. And you guys will be the ones that are going to be called. It's not going to be Indian Affairs or anybody else.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Salazar Henry, that is correct, and that's what we're working with Indian Affairs
Thank
on.
you.
Any other comments, commissioners? Okay. Director, do we take a roll call vote, or do we have a?
Madam Chair, I think you need to close this portion of the
Oh,
hearing
excuse
and
me.
then
Yes. So those that are registered and participated in hearing will be included on the attendance sheet. At this time, the attendance sheet shall be marked and admitted as Exhibit 7. The comments submitted and testimony heard during this rule hearing will be reviewed by the commission and discussed during the open session of today's meeting. The commission will vote on the proposed amendments at this time. I would like to thank everyone present for their participation today, and also for those that had submitted their comments. Let the record show that the rulemaking hearing was adjourned at 11:46 a.m. Today on Friday, October 22nd. Now, let us proceed. Commissioners?
Madam Chair,
We have 2 public comments on Zoom.
Oh, excellent. I did not see those.
First up, we're going to have Logan Christian. I will allow him to talk. Logan, you can unmute your microphone.
All right, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. So, good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Logan Christian, and I'm the Region 2 Conservation Advocate with Mountain Lion Foundation. On behalf of Mountain Lion Foundation, I want to express our support for these proposed changes to the fur bearer rule. Overall, the proposed rule change conforms to Senate Bill 32, the Wildlife Conservation and Public Safety Act. We greatly appreciate the New Mexico Department of Game and Fish has expressed that removing closed areas from the rule will not result in those areas being open to some sport harvest trapping under exemptions in the Wildlife Conservation and Public Safety Act, such as the exemptions for depredation trapping. In most cases, New Mexico Department of Game and Fish will carry out depredation trapping under the Act's specified exemptions and will do so with the use of cage traps as opposed to using private agents. For these and other exemptions in the Act, we urge the New Mexico Department of Game and Fish to ensure that any future publications or communications make clear that exemptions in the Act do not open up existing closures to any sports harvest trapping. As is always the case with new policies, their successful implementation depends on public education, and we believe that the department is well suited to keep the public informed. Finally, we also appreciate the time and effort that will go into implementing the new trapping ban on New Mexico's public lands, as well as the efforts that the Commission and New Mexico Department of Game and Fish are taking to ensure public safety. New Mexico is setting an excellent example for other states, and we hope to follow this matter closely as the agency implements and enforces the ban. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Did you say we have a second comment?
Yes, Madam Chair. I am unmuting Christopher Smith right now.
Very good. Thank you, Christopher Smith.
Chris, can you unmute your microphone?
Yes, good morning. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Madam Chair, members of the commission, thank you for taking public comment on this item today. And thank you, Commissioner Salazar Henry, for facilitating that touching tribute to David Souls earlier this morning. That was appreciated. My name is Chris Smith. I'm here on behalf of Wild Earth Guardians and our thousands of supporters and members across New Mexico. Wild Earth Guardians and other members of the Trap Free New Mexico Coalition have submitted written comments on this proposed rule. And in short, we support the proposal. I won't take the time to read out those substantive comments, but I'm happy to field any questions you may have about those when you have time to read them. I'd like to thank Director Sloan and Chief Liley for taking time to explain in detail some confusions that we had initially with the rule. They smoothed those out for us, and our takeaway is that this rule has been well thought through. So we will be keenly watching implementation and support the commission as you hopefully adopt this rule. Thank you.
Thank you. By the way, I have a friend that does not hear, and he signs. And I do think it's very helpful for persons who do not hear to read lips sometimes. Why I'm taking off. And if Richard is there, hello, Richard. Ms. Bigford, do we have any other comments?
Madam Chair, that is all the comments we have.
Okay, very good. Discussion? No discussion? No. Motion?
Madam Chair, I move to amend 19.32.2 NMAC as presented by the department and allow the department to make minor corrections to comply with filing this rule with the state records and archives.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Very good. Director Sloan, for the record, a roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Salazar Henry.
Yes.
Commissioner Lopez.
Yes.
Commissioner Bates.
Yes.
Vice Chair Vespach.
Yes.
Chair Salazar Hickey.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Very good. Thank you. That was very good. So it's 10 minutes before 12. And I was wondering how efficient we would be in going through the next agenda item, Upland Game Bird Rule Hearing 19.31.5 NMA C. Chief Lively, my thought is that we take a break now, commissioners and department, and then we quickly resume for this particular portion. I don't think you can cover it in 10 minutes.
Madam Chair, it's totally up to you. I can either or.
Commissioners?
I think we should leave now to beat the traffic because lunch will be, or we hear the next two items, rulemaking, and then take a later lunch. If we're not going to do that, we should go now.
Commissioner Lopez, I see you pointing at your watch. What did you want to take at the break now?
Madam Chair, yes, since we're all state employees and FSLA standard rules, we should take a lunch from 12 to.
Okay, very good. So thank you, Commissioners, Department of Game and Fish, and members of the public. This commission is going to take a brief 1 hour lunch break. We will resume by 1 o'clock, but let's try and be back here 10 minutes before 1. Thank you. Department of Game and Fish, members of the public, thank you for coming back. And again, thank you for your patience. It's a beautiful day here in Las Cruces, New Mexico. And commissioners, I was here before 1 o'clock. I will put that on the record. I was here at 1:15. So again, everyone, thank you for your patience with us. It is now 1:19, and we have a lot to cover on our agenda. And so I want to say thank you, Chief Stuart Lively. You're up next. Agenda item number 19, Upland Game Bird Rule Hearing 19.31.5. So, sir, if I may, I would like to begin. Okay? So this hearing will please come to order. My name is Sharon Salazar Hickey, Chair to the Commission. I will be serving as the hearing officer and be advised by the Commission's counsel from the Office of Attorney General, who is online. The purpose of this hearing is for the Commission to receive public comment on repeal in place and replacing the Upland Game Bird Rule, Title 19, Chapter 31, Part 5 of the New Mexico Administrative Code, which will become effective on April 1st, 2022. These hearings are being conducted in accordance with the provisions of the Game and Fish Act and the State Rules Act. These hearings are being audio taped and video recorded. Anyone interested in a copy of the audio tape and video recording should contact Tristana Bickford with the Game and Fish Department. Public notice of this hearing was advertised in the New Mexico Register, the New Mexico Sunshine Portal, and the department's website. Copies of the proposed amendments have been available on the department's website. Those wishing to comment here today must have registered to submit public comments on the Zoom webinar platform. The rule hearing will be conducted in the following manner. Staff will present pre-filed exhibits. Exhibits admitted into evidence are available for review by the public on the department's website. After all exhibits are entered, we will proceed to the presentation of the proposed rule, after which testimony will be taken from the audience. Participants are asked to raise their hand in the Zoom webinar platform and wait until they are called upon to speak. In order to ensure that the hearing is accurately recorded, only one person at a time shall be allowed to speak. Any person recognized to speak is asked to do two things. First, identify yourself by name and who you are affiliated with for the record each time you are recognized. And second, speak loudly and clearly to accurately record your comments. After a person has offered comment, they will stand for questions from the hearing officer. The audience may also ask questions of anyone offering comments after being recognized by me, the hearing officer. These hearings are not subject to judicial rules of evidence. However, in the interest of efficiency, I reserve the right to limit any testimony deemed irrelevant, redundant, and unduly repetitious. The Commission may discuss the proposed new rule after the public comment portion of the hearing. Final Commission action, including adoption of the rule, may occur after the conclusion of the presentation and public comment period of each hearing. So, the hearing is now open. Are there any exhibits for the proposed amendments to 1931.5 for the record? 19.31.5 for the record.
Madam Chair, I wish to enter 6 exhibits into the record. Exhibit number 1, the notice of the rulemaking. Exhibit number 2, the proposed rule that was posted on the website. Exhibit 3, the presentation I'll be giving today. Exhibit 4, the summary of the proposed changes that were posted on the website. Exhibit 5, the technical information we relied upon to develop the rule. And Exhibit 6, the 12 public comments received during the rulemaking process.
Stewart, thank you. Can you please introduce the proposed amendments to 19.31.5?
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, as you all have seen, this is, again, the finalization of this rule. The major amendments that we are proposing is expanding the boundaries of the Bernardo Youth Pheasant Hunt. Right now, it's restricted to one area of the farms at Bernardo. There's a larger complex we'd like to extend it to allow for more room for the youth hunters on there. And one of the bigger ones that we discussed at the previous meetings is expanding the grouse and squirrel seasons from a closed date of the end of November to December 31st. And then again, like all of our rules where we adjust the hunt dates according to calendar day shifts. And removing the manner and method language, that's what we've done in all of our rules. It now lives in the manner and method rules. So this is a cleanup that the last rule that we had manner and method directly in the rule. So with that, like I said, we had 12 emails received or 12 public comments. And what you'll see there, the majority of those comments that relate to this rule are in support of the proposed changes that we had. There was other comments that aren't pertinent to this rule, but there were other comments received. Here's a picture of that expanded youth area that we would allow. Bernardo's there in green, and those other properties or commission properties that we would allow those to be able to hunt if we want to during the pheasant hunt season for the youth. So it just expands the areas at which we could hunt in there. And with that, I would take any questions you all may have.
Thank you, Stuart. Would anyone like to comment on the proposed amendments to 19.31.5? Are there any exhibits from the public that need to be entered into the record at this time? Okay, very good. I do not see any coming forward. Those that registered and participated in hearing will be included on the attendance sheet. At this time, the attendance sheet will be marked as and admitted as Exhibit 7. The comments submitted and testimony heard during this rule hearing will be reviewed by the Commission and discussed during the open session of today's meeting. The Commission will vote on proposed amendments at this time. I would like to thank everyone present for their participation today. Let the record show that this rulemaking hearing was adjourned at 1:26 p.m. Today on Friday, October 22nd. Very good. Commissioners, let's have some discussion. Vice Chair? No? Very good. Commissioners? No. Very good. Well then, Vice Chair, do you have a motion?
I sure do.
Okay.
I would move to repeal and replace 19.31.5 NMAC as presented by the department and allow the department to make minor corrections to comply with filing this rule with the state records and archives.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioners. Director, can we please have a roll call vote? I believe we do have a commissioner online, so we do need a roll call vote.
Commissioner Salazar Henry.
Yes.
Commissioner Lopez.
Yes.
Commissioner Bates.
Commissioner Bates? He's thumbs up. I see him. Thank you, Commissioner Bates.
Vice Chair Vesbach.
Yes.
Chair Salazar Hickey.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Wonderful. That was very good. Thank you. I think, Commissioners, that concludes agenda item number 9 on the upland game bird rule. If we could, let's now proceed to agenda item number 10. This is the Fisheries Rule Hearing 19.31.4. And I see we have a member of the Department of Game and Fish present. So let me begin. This hearing will please come to order. My name is Sharon Salazar Hickey, Chair to the Commission. I will be serving as the hearing officer and be advised by the Commission's counsel from the Office of the Attorney General. The purpose of this hearing is for the Commission to receive public comment on repealing and replacing the Fisheries Rule, Title 19, Chapter 31, Part 4, amending hunting, fishing, manner, and method of taking rule, Title 19, Chapter 31, Part 10, and repealing and replacing commercial use of fish rule, Title 19, Chapter 31, Part 9 of the New Mexico Administrative Code, which will become effective on April 1st, 2022. These hearings are being conducted in accordance with the provisions of the Game and Fish Act and the State Rules Act. These hearings are being audio taped and video recorded. Anyone interested in a copy of the audio tape or video recording should contact Tristana Bickford with the Game and Fish Department. Public notice of this hearing was advertised in the New Mexico Register, the New Mexico Sunshine Portal, and on the department's website. Copies of the proposed amendments have been available on the department's website. Those wishing to comment here today must have registered to submit public comments on the Zoom webinar platform. The rule hearing will be conducted in the following manner. Staff will present pre-filed exhibits. Exhibits admitted into evidence are available for review by the public on the department's website. After all exhibits are entered, we will proceed to the presentation of the proposed rule, after which testimony will be taken from the audience. Participants are asked to raise their hand in the Zoom webinar platform and wait until they are called to speak in order to ensure that the hearing is accurately recorded. Only one person at a time shall be allowed to speak. Any person recognized to speak is asked to first identify yourself by name and who you are affiliated with for the record each time you are recognized, and second, speak loud and clear to accurately record your comments. After a person has offered comments, they will stand for questions from the hearing officer, me. The audience may also ask questions of anyone offering comments after being recognized by me. These hearings are not subject to judicial rules of evidence. However, in the interest of efficiency, I reserve the right to limit any testimony deemed irrelevant, redundant, or unduly repetitious. The Commission may discuss the proposed new rule after the public comment portion of the hearing. Final Commission action including adoption of the rule, may occur after the conclusion of the presentation and public comment period of each hearing. This hearing is now open. Are there any exhibits for the proposed amendments to 19.31.4, 19.31.10, and 19.31.9 of the New Mexico Administrative Code for the record?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair.
You need to turn on your mic.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Yes, I have 6 exhibits I would like to introduce into evidence. The first of these is a copy of the rulemaking notice, which was published in the New Mexico Register. We have a clean and a red line version of the rule, a copy of my presentation today, a summary of proposed changes, which was published on the department's website, technical information, which was relied upon for the rulemaking process, as well as a copy of the public comments received today.
Thank you, sir. Would anyone like to comment on the proposed amendments to 19.31.4, 19.31.10, and 19.31.9? I do not hear it.
Madam Chair, I think Kirk needs to give a presentation first.
Oh, very good. Yes, yes, you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. This is a presentation you've heard on 2 prior occasions. For the sake of your time today, I'm going to blow through some of this quickly and just go over the highlights. As a reminder, the fisheries rule is on a 4-year rule cycle. It's set to expire next March, and so we're doing this hearing today to have it in place and ready to go on April 1 of 2022. In reviewing this, we also identified some needs for fisheries changes in the manner and method rule, as well as the commercial use of fish rule, and that's why we're doing 3 rule changes today. Briefly, we are proposing to remove Kokanee or Abiquiu Reservoir from the list of waters that are open to kokanee snagging. We are proposing to essentially double the cutthroat trout possession limit from 2 to 4 fish. We are proposing to increase the harvest limit for Rio Grande cutthroat trout or cutthroat trout at Seven Springs Kids Pond. And we are proposing to add 2 summer catfish waters to the existing list, that being Trees Lake in Deming and Harris Pond in Las Vegas. We're also proposing 2 definition changes. The first of these is to clarify what is a daily bag limit, that being a calendar day. There's been some confusion in the past with that. We're removing reference to trout waters in our regulations. If you can see my cursor here, this pink area it's a historic relic of the trout stamp days, and we no longer use it in any rule. So we want to remove that to clear up any confusion along the way. We're proposing to remove the statewide length limit for walleye. I could go into details if you're interested, but essentially it doesn't make a whole lot of biological sense to have that length limit in place. We're also proposing to remove the smallmouth bass length limit in the upper Rio Grande to expand some angling opportunities up there, and as well as potentially promote better growth of smallmouth bass. We are also collapsing the combinations of age-related restrictions as well as individuals with disabilities restrictions in waters across the state, go from 6 different combinations down to 3. We think that will just help clarify for the public as well as for ourselves and our officers within the department. We have a handful of access proposals. Probably the most significant there is to clarify that Heron Lake is open to kokanee snagging season on November 11th. That's Veterans Day. There's always been some somewhat confusing language about when that opens to accommodate our kokanee snagging or our kokanee spawning operations at Heron. We are removing fishing hours designations for some waters in the state. We're going to rely upon signage as a means by the landowners. We're proposing to opening McKenna Creek and Pine Lodge Creeks to angling. McKenna Creek used to be a Gila trout recovery population that we've discovered is hybridized with non-native trout, so there's no need to keep it closed to angling anymore. Pine Lodge Creek no longer supports a self-sustaining population of trout, so we're opening that for potentially some seasonal rainbow trout stocking efforts. And then we were proposing to allow kids fishing in the Rock Lake hatchery outfall ponds. Moving on to the manner and method in the commercial use of fish rules, we want to clarify the definition of a drainage regarding what is lawful bait species. We are proposing to permit lawful use of shad in the Pecos River drainage. The species is native there, and so it makes sense to have that. It's just kind of a cleanup language from the past. We're also clarifying how we define what waters you can use a trot line in. There's really no substantive change here. It's just how we describe it in rule for clarity's sake. And then in the commercial use of fish rule, we are removing a reference to trout water that is, again, attached to the trout stamp days. We conducted public meetings back in May of this year after we talked to you as a commission. I believe it was in April. We received some public comments. Most of them were supportive or kind of making recommendations related to statutory changes and those sorts of things. We published a rulemaking notice last month, and since that time, we have not received any additional comments. So thank you for your time, and I will take any questions you may have.
Kirk, thank you very much for your introduction on the proposed amendments to 19.31.4, 19.31.10, and 19.31.9. Thank you for that introduction and summary. So, would anyone like to comment on the proposed amendments to those rules as I just described? Commissioner.
Madam Chair, I just have a question that's sort of related to this presentation. Given the issues up north, especially with lake levels, are we looking at any sort of different strategies for adjusting for lower lake levels for some of these fish species? And is there something in the fishing proclamation that warns people that you could close a lake at any time?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Salazar Henry, I think the easier answer there is I don't believe there's anything in there in the proclamation about closing a water at any particular time in the rules and information book. One of the good things about being a fish biologist in the desert is we are always kind of managing for drought and managing for no water. And so I think we've got a long history of being able to adapt our fisheries management to changing conditions. And then, as an example, I would say is, in the case of Abiquiu Reservoir, we used to manage it as a cold water fishery, and there was some warm water fish in there. Over time, we've been moving more towards walleye and smallmouth bass and reducing. In fact, now we don't even manage it as a cold water fishery. So, I think we are taking that into consideration, but it's a process along the way.
Thank you.
Any other commissioners? Okay. Are there any exhibits from the public that need to be entered into the record at this time? Okay. Exhibits 1 through 6 are admitted into the record. Thank you. Kirk, those that registered and participated in hearing will be included on the attendance sheet. At this time, the attendance sheet will be marked and admitted as Exhibit 7. The comments submitted and testimony heard during this rule hearing will be reviewed by the Commission and discussed during the open session of today's meeting. The Commission will vote on the proposed amendments at this time. I would like to thank everyone present for their participation today. Let the record show that this rulemaking hearing was adjourned at 1:41 p.m. today, Friday, October 22nd, 2021. Thank you. Discussion. I hear no discussion. Vice Chair, do we have a motion?
Sure do. I would move to repeal and replace the Fisheries Rule 19.31.4 NMAC, amend the Hunting and Fishing Manner and Method of Taking Rule 19.31.10 NMAC, and repeal and replace the Commercial Use of Fish Rule 19.31.9 NMAC as presented by the Department with an effective date of April 1st, 2022, and allow the Department to make minor corrections to comply with filing this rule with the State Records and Archives.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Director Sloan, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Salazar Henry.
Yes.
Commissioner Lopez.
Yes.
Commissioner Bates. Thumbs up.
Yes.
Vice Chair Vespach.
Yes.
Chair Salazar Hickey.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Director. Thank you, Department of Game and Fish. Very good. Now, let's move on to agenda item number 12. This is the Open Gate Program Overview. We've already...
Madam Chair.
Excuse me. Lord Almighty, I don't want to appear like I'm railroad. So let me back up. One of the best agenda items. Colonel Robert Griego. Initial discussion on hunting and fishing revocation rule 19.31.2. So, Colonel Griego, it is always a pleasure to see you. Can you please give us a presentation?
Yes, ma'am. Madam Chair, Commissioners, this is the initial discussion on potentially revamping the revocation rule. As you all know, currently the Game Commission has the ability to revoke a person's privileges for a definite period of time if you feel that it was an egregious violation. We were given the direction to come up with a draft rule that would allow the department the ability to provide a revocation timeframe recommendation. So what we did is this attempt is come up with some ideas on giving some general timeframes for a first, second, and third revocation. That first revocation would be up to 3 years. Currently, it's any definite period of time for that revocation. Second revocation up to 5 years would be consistent with the way it is now. Third revocation would be no less than 10 years. Currently, it's up to 7. For the felony convictions, felony waste of game, it'd be no less than 7 years for a first and no less than 10 for a second. Currently, we are at up to 7 and up to 10. To address the concern of the department bringing forward recommendations to the commission, we came up with an enhancement portion that would be in rule that would allow the department to recommend any period of revocation longer than those set to a hearing officer if a hearing is requested, or to the Game Commission if no hearing is requested. When the respondent has accrued 40 or more violation points, is subject to a civil restitution for trophy civil, any recommendation that the department brought forward would be in writing, and neither the hearing officer nor the commission would be bound by those rules or by those recommendations. And that would be an enhancement to that first, second, and third revocation in those timeframes that were set. Along with enhancement, there'd be a mitigation section, basically that would allow the department to do just the opposite, to recommend a period of revocation shorter than those set when the department believes there's mitigating circumstances. And again, that recommendation would be in writing to a hearing officer or to you all. With that mitigation and that enhancement, we thought creating a 40-point category that would aid in defining egregious violations. We'd simplify the point system by having 40, 20, 10, and 5, and 3-point. We would evaluate the revocation point designations based on the severity and how common those violations actually are. So an example of what we would recommend or have come up with for some 40-point violations that we think on their face are egregious is spotlighting, obviously the felony waste of game, selling or purchasing any of our protected species, shooting from an aircraft, computer-aided remote hunting, or the taking of threatened or endangered species. Currently, the way we have it, all 20-point violations would remain 20 points, or that 40-point designation if we considered them egregious. We would recommend changing 17-point violations, up to 20, getting rid of that 17-point designation, and that would be that, putting it back, hunting in the wrong GMU or outside the ranch boundaries, or hunting on public with a private land-only license. The last commission removed those from 20 down to 17. We would be putting them back up to 20. The vast majority of 15 and 10-point violations would be reduced to either 10-point, except for exceeding the bag limit of big game, which is currently a 15-point. We would move that up to 20. And importation or possession of class 2, 3, and 4 species of the director's list. That's a violation that over the years we're having significant issues of people illegally importing, for example, alligators into New Mexico, and we would make that a 20-point violation. Also part of this recommendation, there's some administrative cleanup that we'd like to do the revocation rule regardless. I've discussed with a few of you on, it would be nice if we could just send a letter of notice for suspension for any penalty assessment violations, parental responsibility, wildlife violators compact, or failure to appear. Currently, we've got to send them a notice of contemplated action, give them the opportunity for a hearing, when in fact they were issued a citation and they were told they had 30 days to pay it. They don't pay it, then we send them a notice of contemplated action. So by the time they end up getting suspended, it's closer to 120 days. So we'd like to just send a letter saying, hey, you didn't pay it, you're suspended till you come into compliance with child support or your penalty assessment. In that administrative cleanup, we'd also give individuals additional timelines when that 20 days falls on a holiday or a weekend. We have always done that, but we're going to just clarify it in rule that we can do that and really make the rule more consistent with other administrative rules in the state to include motor vehicle department administrative codes. So really moving forward, what we're looking for is some direction to start working on the rule and come up with something solid. When we do that, then we'll have some public meetings to get public input, because there will be, if we go down this road, enough substantial changes that we need to get the public involved, and then bring the rule back to you all in time to have the hearings and get the rule in place by April 1st of 2022. So with that, I'll take questions.
Colonel Griego, that was a very fine presentation. Thank you. That was very, very helpful. I also want to say thank you. I know you worked very hard behind the scenes before coming today with many of the commissioners. I know you did some extensive work and benchmarking. You looked at other options. In a nutshell, 20 words or less, just briefly, can you describe some of that background? In my opinion, benchmarking and doing some comparison is very helpful.
To other states or other options?
Well, all of the above. I know you looked at other states too, yeah.
So we did come up with some potential other options, Madam Chair, Commissioners. One other option is keeping, for example, the increasing the categories to have a 40, 20, 10, 15, but also what it would be is based on the point value, would that equate to years? For example, 20 to 39 points would be a 3-year revocation, 40 to 59 points would be a 5-year revocation, 60 to 79 points, 7 years, and so on. So based on the total point value that an individual was convicted to, that would equate to a specific number of years of revocation. So that's one option. And that being said, none of them are perfect. There's always those circumstances where you have an individual that, for some reason, they just take full responsibility. They go in and plead, and they may have 100 points and may not warrant a 9-year revocation. But with that, I would recommend that we also include that enhancement or mitigation language so we can adjust based on the specific circumstance if we went that route. The other option that we came up with is keeping the point system current as it is, but just adding the mitigation and enhancement language. So we would have the ability, as Commissioner Salazar Henry was wanting the department to come forward with recommendations, we would keep that language in there, but keep the revocation timeframes and point structure as it currently sits today. So that would be the three options, is adding a 40-point category where it kind of defines egregious by its nature, with that mitigation and enhancement language. Point value equates to a specific number of years of revocation, or just add the enhancement and mitigation where we can bring recommendation forward.
Thank you, Colonel. I do have one question. With the reference to aircraft, does it include the definition, does definition include drones?
Madam Chair, for that particular statute, no, that does not include a drone. That is actually shooting from an aircraft. Using a drone would still be a 20-point violation, but that's not what that egregious violation is. That's actually physically being in an aircraft and shooting at a protected species.
That's my question. Commissioners, anybody else have a question?
I just have some comments. Colonel Griego and field operations staff, I really want to thank you all for hearing us and giving us a better, I think, better system. And what you put together today really reflects what I think I would like for the commission to express as our support for our officers in the field for trying to get a handle on what's happening out there. And so, and specifically, Bobby, I'd like to thank you very much for working with me and following up to get some clarity. I thought that was really important and a great show of leadership, so thank you.
Thank you.
Vice Chair?
Yes, Madam Chair, Colonel Griego. Yeah, out of the options you laid out, if we're going to enhance penalties, I really like them being known. If it's going to be a deterrent, I think not knowing what the commission is going to do and have the commission able to bring it up, I don't really see how that would enhance any deterrence factors. So happy with moving this forward to gather public input. I'm really want to see what people think about it, get more feedback, continue to understand it better myself. But I appreciate you putting this together, and I would like to see it move forward. And then kind of going back to just the previous presentation we had on OHVs, is driving off-road in a closed area a revocable offense?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Vesbach, no, not alone. That would be a 10-point violation.
Okay. And is that something the commission has authority over?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Vesbach, it is.
Okay. I'd be curious to know more about that, so thank you.
Madam Chair, Commissioner, typically when we have those violations, all it takes is a couple other violations in conjunction with it to reach the 20-point threshold, but yeah, we can discuss that for sure.
Commissioner?
Sorry, thank you, Madam Chair, for indulging me. Colonel Griego, one of the things that I think a lot of the people that I hunt with and hang out with that are really frustrated about there are two primary things. Applying as a resident, being a non-resident, and this goes both ways. A private land hunter having a private land tag, hunting on public land, and public land hunters that hunt on private land with a public land tag. How does that fall in the point system here as an example?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Salazar Henry, so the residency violation or the non-resident purchasing a resident license would be a 20-point violation on its face as we have it today. We did not list that in that egregious category, but since we put that 40-point threshold, if they were to draw a license and then actually come out and hunt and harvest, they would be well within that 40-point threshold if they were convicted of all that. The hunting right now as we have it, so obviously you have criminal trespass, that is automatic 20 points and an automatic 3-year revocation by statute. You have the hunting on public with a private land license. We put that back at 20 points. Right now, what we have for hunting on private with a public license, we put it at 15 or 10, sorry, if we get rid of that 15. And the reason being, if they post their property, we have criminal trespass. So we would be eliminating that scenario where it was unposted private property that they may or may not have known where they exactly were. And again, if there's other violations, they harvest, something like that, we would get that 20-point threshold. But the simple fact of getting on unposted property would not be 20 points. It's currently a 17-point violation, and that was the only one that we did not move up to 20 points. We moved it down because of criminal trespass. It puts a little onus back on the landowner on post your property, and then we've got criminal trespass all day, which is revocable.
Director?
Madam Chair, I'd just like to ask a clarifying question. On the driving in a closed area, is that something you'd like us to vet a higher point while they're going out to the public now, or just something you'd like to continue to discuss?
Yeah, I'd like to vet that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Madam Chair, we have one public comment on this.
Thank you, Ms. Bickford. Good afternoon. Comment, Madeline Carey.
Madeline, you are allowed to talk.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, Colonel, thank you. Thank you for taking up this issue. I know that there's an intention to put it out for public comment, and I've emailed you all about this, but I'm really interested in how this is going to apply to landowners who put in through the E+ system. There's currently a situation where we have someone who's violated the Endangered Species Act and has been convicted of killing in a really horrific way a Mexican gray wolf who's continuing to receive E+ tags through the landowner system. I don't know what it looks like on y'all's back end to look at draw applicants, authorized ranch contacts, and all of that stuff. But I think, there's a lot of dialogue going around E+ right now. And in my eyes, this is another inequity that we're potentially holding draw applicants to a much higher standard than we're holding authorized ranch contacts and E+ eligible property owners. So as part of the public process, I would be interested in seeing that issue be raised. Thank you very much.
Colonel Griego, did you want to comment on or respond to that comment? I just saw you make a.
No, I was just trying to hear.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Madam Chair?
Thank you, Madeline. Yes, Commissioner.
Can I ask Director Sloan to get some clarity on that comment? Are they asking, right now, everything that we've created under the point system or for revocation is authorized through either statute, through some statute that gives us the authority over the species that we're responsible for, correct?
Madam
That
Chair,
are
Commissioner
protected.
Henry, that is correct.
And so how would this apply to Mexican wolves, and how would you create some sort of rule that says any privilege you have with game and fish gets revoked on? I don't understand what they're trying to do with this. Since I don't think do we have authority over Mexican wolf right now? Yes. So we could make it a revocation, but they're asking us to, if it's a landowner who is caught killing a Mexican wolf, to take away all their permits, et cetera, or I'm trying to figure that out, Director Sloan.
Madam Chair, that's my understanding of the request, is that if they're revoked, they should not be eligible to receive E+ tags. We've discussed that internally, and it is a little bit more complicated in that it isn't always the landowner is it the landowner that's getting the tags? Is it a ranch contact? Is it a guide? Who committed the crime? There are a lot of people involved in that E+ system, and then you can always shift to somebody different and still get the tag. So, we've been discussing it, we'll continue to discuss it. I understand the intent. It's just the way that that system works and the people involved in it at multiple levels makes it a little more complicated than just, well, you owned this piece of property, you did this thing, so therefore you can't get it. It isn't always that simple.
So, Director Sloan, so to do something like this, would it fall within this revocation rule? Would you have a separate rule for stuff like that? I don't know how it fits, because we are going beyond just hunting and fishing privileges. They're talking about being involved in the system in another manner.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Salazar, Henry, I believe, and I'm sure Stuart and Bobby have an opinion, but I believe we would have to have something in the E+ rule relative to eligibility, not just in the revocation rule.
Oh, and thank you for that question, Commissioner. Ms. Carey, I thought your comment was very helpful and it was very good. And I agree with you, Director, that if we had a clarification, it would probably be in the E+ versus in this revocation rule. That's where I was going with that. Okay, any other comments? No. Okay. Well, then, in that case, thank you very much, Colonel Griego. That was very good. Now, next up, agenda item number 12, the Open Gate Program Overview. Chief Lively, are you prepared to give a presentation?
Madam Chair, of course I am. Madam Chair, members of the commission, today is kind of just a little bit of an overview of a program that we have called Open Gate, and then also a good discussion, I think, with the commission on if there's potential paths to move forward to what I will say, move a program that was initiated in 2005 as a pilot program. It's kind of stayed in, I would guess, more of a pilot concept. And I say that pilot concept because since 2005, we really haven't changed anything in the program, funds, et cetera, expenditures from the program, or the intent or the purpose of the original program. So just a real quick background so you know what the program is. We currently have one employee who is the program manager, Gary Calkins. He's really the only one that kind of does the agreements, those kind of things. We do work with field ops really well on trying to figure out properties that may be beneficial for use or try to get at access. That annual budget, like I said, has stayed stagnant since 2005 at about $200,000. And we'll get to a few issues with that here in a second. We currently have roughly 55,000 acres under agreement with private landowners for offering up hunting opportunities. And then approximately 155,000 acres that are under an agreement that allows access to public land. So it'd be lands that are public that currently don't have a route of access into it. We have an agreement with the landowner to get access across their private property to then get into the public property. Just shy of 10 stream miles that are under agreement, and almost 800 surface water acres that are under agreement. In terms of property types, we have 7 fishing-only properties, 11 hunting-only properties, 5 public access properties, and 4 properties that offer both hunting and fishing opportunities enrolled in the current program. Really, when the program was initiated and continues to be today, the focus was on small game fishing and then access to those public lands that are currently inaccessible. There's not a current dollar cap for a landowner, but it's limited by the fee schedule that is set by the commission. We'll get into that in just a second, but that fee schedule has been a limitation for maybe other things like getting more landowners enrolled in the program. It's just not it's cost prohibitive for them to get in. We can't offer enough to probably enroll a lot of these other properties. Right now, what we try to do is get voluntary information from public users of these Open Gate properties through our website, through some mailouts, through email, and we're only getting about returns of 35 to 40 responses across the state on an annual basis. So we really probably lack the information of use on some of these open gate properties, not knowing if people are actually using them, or are they beneficial? What's their thoughts on it? Should they stay enrolled, et cetera? So I think that's a big issue that we see that we'd like to be fixed. There are properties that are high-use properties. For example, Monastery Lake is an open gate enrollment. That's right there outside of Pecos. It's probably one of our highest use open gate properties. What we did too is we wanted to kind of take a look at some of the western states. Where are they in their programs? We're not unique in New Mexico in an access program to private lands for hunters or anglers. And what you see there is really a range from Utah low end of $100,000 on an annual basis up to almost $8.4 million in Montana. So a wide range in terms of where the western United States or states within the kind of western tier are in their open gate or their access programs. And also a strong difference there in personnel too. And as we grow this program, or if we grow the program, that's probably one of the things that we're going to have to deal with is personnel to monitor the program, personnel to work on on-site cleanup, because it does take some of that, or just even working agreements and trying to get with landowners. You'll see, Montana probably has, and Texas is asterisked as the most. What that is they really have a lot of part-time employees that do a lot of other things. This is just a job duty as assigned. So it's not 79 people dedicated to it. It's 4 FTEs. Montana has the most FTEs and seasonal staff, and that's probably the thing that we would see is really when the hunting seasons are going on, that's when we would see more need for staff members dealing with that. The other thing that I think we've seen a shift from when these programs were really started 15, 20 years ago is there was an emphasis on small game and really bird hunting. The emphasis is being driven more into the big game realm and trying to get into big game hunting access on private land. That's where you see Montana's probably highest dollar, has the most big game access of any of the states in terms of that, and that's why that cost is there. I think that kind of some of the discussions from the hunting public here would like to see us get more big game access, and with that it's going to take money and probably time to get there, because in order to be competitive to get landowners to sign up, it really is going to take more significant funds than what we have and what the current fee schedule is that we could offer right now. And going back to that fee schedule, and I'll get into where we kind of have some ideas of work and we can maybe move forward. The fee schedule is based off the premises of access on private lands that were near city centers. So that was one of the first pay looks, and we were paying properties to proximity to cities. And it was trying to get more use closer to town, easier. And what we found is those properties probably weren't as great. People were willing to go further, and a lot of those properties came out. So I think that fee schedule being set that way distracted some of really good properties further away from those city centers. It was a 60-mile radius within Albuquerque or Las Cruces, Roswell, et cetera. And we couldn't offer the pay to keep landowners enrolled. Right now, we're at about 180, 160,000 on an annual basis because we're losing landowners that are unenrolling because we can't keep up with what pay would be from what the fee schedule is. Another aspect of it is that they had to have multiple species on there to get more pay. And by multiple species is quail and waterfowl or something like that. We had properties that were small, really good turkey properties that we could only offer by the fee schedule, maybe $600 for them. Great turkey hunting properties, but they're unenrolled because the use was high, that we had a lot of enjoyment on it, but it just wasn't worth it to them at $600. And I think we need to shift that fee schedule, if we're going to do this, into something that takes into account where we don't have public access. I think that's where public lands are limited is probably one of the first things, and target those. And then also target areas where it's species specific, or for example, in the Northeast, target pronghorn properties. Access is a little bit limited, potentially pay premiums on areas where it's, instead of number of species, what's the density, what's the likelihood of having success, et cetera. I'll go through some other kind of ideas of what we feel like and get in a little bit more details on some of that in a second, but really what we think it would be is a four 4 different participation agreements is what we're looking at. One for big game and one for small game, so separating those components out. It's not a hunting one, it's more of a big game or a small game. You know, the small game where we're looking at mainly is waterfowl agreements, some quail agreements, could potentially overlap with big game, but we would sign 2 different agreements at that time. I think we would pay separately for small game and hunting, and that allows us to properly pay a property, I guess, for what they're offering for access. And then fishing agreement, and then, excuse me, the other one is continue with that public land access, where we have either landlocked public lands that are inaccessible to the public, or where it makes it a lot easier, like the Coronado example that was given earlier this morning. Can we enter into an agreement like that to get access into some public lands that were currently not available? I'll go into depth in just a second on each one of these, but right now we have a public access component. We would continue that. What you're looking at here is an agreement that red line is a lease across a road on private property into the San Mateo Mountains. And so what it's doing is open up access into that San Mateo Mountains that doesn't have current access into it, or it's very difficult access into it. And we would plan on continuing that. You know, I think one of the things that we would do on a payment or propose to the commission to do on a payment on this is a bonus for large contiguous landlocked acres. So if you had 10,000 landlocked acres that has no public access at all, potentially get more of a bonus on that. It's more benefit. I think that's what we're looking at right now is pay more for the bigger benefit that you receive for the sportsmen and women of New Mexico is how we would kind of like to see the fee schedule be, instead of just every property is unique, but where's the need again on, and also probably look at a different rate in units that have very little public access, but some public land, those kind of things. On that, the big game, small game, and fishing, one of the things that, like I mentioned before, is what we're lacking is knowledge on use on some of these properties and knowledge on sports people's feelings towards that property. When I say feelings, is it a good property to them? Is it a bad property to them? Should it stay in the program? Should it not? And so what we're looking at is potential ways to do a check-in system so we can monitor how many people are using those properties and then monitor their satisfaction of those properties. You know, Wyoming is going to this model, and I think they're seeing a lot of success. Some of them even to the point of where it's a QR code or something on a sign at the gate. So it doesn't prohibit a person when they drive by, they didn't sign up a week ago, it still allows them to sign up, even if there's not mobile reception at a later point, so we can track that person down to say, what was a survey to it? One of the things that other states have done too is pay a bonus based upon use as well. So if you're a high-use property, there's a potential to get a bonus because you're there. It would also allow us on these low-use or no-use properties to disenroll them from the program. Right now, that's one of the struggles we have. We do have some properties that have quail or have waterfowl, have the potential to be good properties. We just don't know what the use is on them, and is it worth the money that's being paid right now? The other thing, like I said, you know, a property has the potential, like this one, maybe let's say, has the potential for hunting and fishing. And we do have some of those, but we would sign a separate agreement for hunting and a separate agreement for fishing is what we would plan on. Right now, we don't have that really ability. It just gives them a little bit of a bonus, but it's not enough to recognize that they might be providing quality waterfowl hunting at the same time quality fishing. So we would propose something like that where we're multiple agreements per property if they can qualify. This just real quick, again, separating out big game and small game I think is going to be key for us, and having different payment structures for that. Pay a premium for big game is I think what it is. Right now, we have a couple of deer properties in the program. We can't get a pronghorn property in the program. We've had landowners call us about it. The way the fee schedule that comes in when we make that offer of what we can, according to the commission fee schedule, we have not had anyone interested in taking it. So again, I think what we would do is have a different fee, set a base rate different for small game and waterfowl versus big game, with that big game being a premium. And then we pay a bigger premium dependent upon, you know, if it's a place where it's high density pronghorn, has a probability to get a lot more hunters on that property, we want a premium for something like that. The other thing that we kind of have been in discussions about, and a model that Oklahoma is going towards, is a bonus payment for enrolling your neighbor and making bigger contiguous properties. A one-time bonus for the landowner that comes in and the landowner already enrolled. It then becomes one property, large contiguous, bigger benefit for the hunter to get on there. So that's one of the things we've thought about for as a potential for some of this as bonuses to encourage enrollment in the program and to grow the program. And I think that's kind of what we've seen, we've heard a little bit, is they like the program, but it's stagnant. It really isn't, it's hard to judge use. Again, on some of these fishing properties, I think we have high use, but in the hunting aspect, probably much lower use. I think the biggest thing, talking to the other states, looking at the other states of what their programs are, I think at a minimum to really grow the program and to actually see meaningful benefits to sportsmen and women across the state, fishermen and women across the state, we're probably looking at a program at a minimum of $1 million on an annual basis to enroll enough acres in the land across the state to get some kind of bigger program in there. Again, if we want to stay down the path of small game and fishing, we probably don't have to go there. If we want to get into a program that has more big game opportunities, I think we're really going to have to show and pay more in order to do that. With time, I think it will take some time to get all the landowners enrolled, landowners understanding what the program is, and word of mouth through landowners to start getting payments out there. So it will be a phased-in approach. It's not going to happen overnight. We're not going to go enroll 100,000 acres tomorrow. But I do think through time we'll get there pretty quick. I do also, like I discussed, talking with our Open Gate Program coordinator, just on signage and managing with properties, it probably will take some kind of, we think, technician-type people in the fall for big game hunting properties especially, is what we see coming into that. So I think that's kind of some of the ideas that we've thought of. I know we've had discussion with some of the other committees, our commission members about this, and I do think it is, is it something that the commission would like to see us proceed with is kind of what we're looking at is, and then there's going to have to be some discussions on budget, obviously, and how we get to that $1 million mark and what's the most appropriate. So with that, I think I would be willing to take any questions from the commission.
Chief, wow. That was very good. Very good. We have public comment as well, and I'd like to take that. But first, let me look to the vice chair because I know you've been, this has been on your radar screen. And then I'd also like to hear from the commissioner, chair of Finance Committee. So, Vice Chair.
Well, first off, thank you, Chief Liley. I know you've done some thorough investigation with other states, you and the program manager, Gary Calkins. And, I really support moving forward with, growing this program. And, I hope we can bring back a proposal to create a dedicated fund in statute and a proposal for rules to move forward with growing this program. I have a couple questions. One is, there's federal grants available through NRCS. When is the next round of those?
So, Madam Chair, Commissioner Vestbach, all that money after the last Farm Bill has been used, we found out. So it'd have to come after a new Farm Bill, and hopefully it would come in through that. Those grants were up to $3 million per agency at a time, and they were for 3 years. So theoretically, in the next Farm Bill, if it comes through in the next Farm Bill, which I think it shows strong support for that access program in the Farm Bill, it would potentially allow the department to go after and receive grants if it does come through in the next federal Farm Bill.
Okay. And I think one of the proposals Congress is considering now would like quadruple Farm Bill Conservation Program funding if that comes. That's a crapshoot if that comes through or not. But I think we really want to be ready to start to capture that federal fund, those federal funds. There were, they're not an annual basis, but I think was it Oklahoma got $3 million or something in that last round for access. So I think we're getting ready and getting positioned to go for those federal funds. Just a couple of, you mentioned, are you thinking about daily limits for big game on landowner properties where, because I think if we're going to move into more big game, there's the situation where everybody in the unit might want to go check out a new property that's enrolled, and I think landowners are going to want to have that option to have some limits on daily usage.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Belzbauer, thank you for bringing that up. Yes, we have definitely looked at that. Montana and Wyoming have that model. I think we probably like the Wyoming model better. So Montana's model is a contact between the hunter and the landowner. The landowner then determines how many people and who. Wyoming has a different model where it's an online registration at a certain date that allows for example, let's say we have 5 different elk hunts in that GMU. They want to limit it to 10 hunters. Wyoming takes on the model of putting out a first come, first serve on their website registration process. That I think that's a better process than what we hear in the confusion in the Montana where it's someone a hunter can't get a hold of this person, can't reach them, loses that opportunity to get there. So yes, I think we are looking at some of those limitations so we don't have 600 pronghorn hunters showing up to one property. Now, we don't have 600 licensed in any one unit, but that's the example is to try to limit it and keep a quality experience. And maybe have a different fee schedule for landowners at that point too, depending on, we don't want to have them limited to 1, but still receive the money that they would receive at 50 or 60. And so that would be something we would propose into the fee schedule as well.
Okay. And then are you thinking you said separate big game, or separate hunting and fishing agreements if a landowner had 2, but it sounds like you're thinking big game and small game in the same?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Vesbach, we would actually have proposing separate agreements for small game and separate for big game as well, because we would propose separate fee schedules for those as well.
Okay. Yeah, and I just put a little plug in for our podcast. If anybody hasn't listened to it, we have a wonderful Game and Fish podcast where your open gate coordinator, Gary Calkins, talks about the program, and it's really a good listen to get, even more familiar with it. And I think it's a great program. It's, gives options to landowners. It's more opportunity for our hunters and anglers out there. And, I'm super supportive of moving forward with this. And I want to hear public comment, but we may have a little more to say after that.
Other commissioners' comments? Commissioner Salazar Henry.
Chief Lively, I know we've talked about this in our hunt structure meeting, and I really appreciate you taking all the million of suggestions we think we have on trying to move forward this and actually capturing what we were thinking about. One of the things I was really surprised is that we have a current commission-approved fee schedule that I never even knew about. So it was like, shame on me for not knowing that. So I guess I have actually 2 questions. Should we even attempt to, before April, modify the current fee schedule to reflect any new program changes? And if so, what do we need to do in the budget cycle now to obligate cash balance during the legislative session to accommodate growing the program, but at a minimum, stop the bleeding of who we have leaving because we're not, or not even letting new people in because we don't pay enough to warrant their time. So I guess, well, it's actually 3 questions. Can we have something built by then so that everybody's comfortable with what's going on?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Salazar Henry, I do think, yes, from a pure perspective of could we have an idea of what a new fee schedule would be, yes. I think we're in the process of looking at that, trying to run the numbers. We're close on that. The difficult part that we'll have is we're in a little bit of, we normally sign those agreements starting April 1st. And so if we're going to move into a new fee schedule, I think we'd have to be fairly soon on that. So we would, because there's potential that some properties are going to fall out this next year. So if we get ready to give, I think, proper notification to property owners that are currently enrolled to say, look, here's the new fee schedule. You're going to come down to this, or you go to this. Some may say, yes, absolutely, we want to stay in, and it might increase their pay. There's some that might decrease the way we're thinking of a fee schedule, paying less for small game. So if we do, I think we'd want to do it soon. And then the next question on the budgetary aspect, it kind of depends on, as you know, the legislative session and how they determine how it falls out. It wasn't built into this fiscal year 23 '23 budget that was adopted by the commission in August. Is there some wiggle room in there to start this program? I think so. I don't think we're going to get to that full $1 million. Again, like I said, the first year. So I think we have opportunities to start phasing it in with the current budget. But bigger discussions with some of the current landowners, I think, is going to be important to really figure out, here's what your money that you will get. Are you going to stay in or not? And we would need that done by April 1st.
So I know we talked about there's no way, if we gave you $1 million tomorrow, there's no way you could get a program up and running and be able to use it all at the same time. So will you guys be able to give us a number of what you think you would need to make it worthwhile, to show that we're ramping this up? I think I'm more invested in getting a successful open gate program, because I know resident hunters and hunters in general want more access to places to hunt. They want to be able to access more permits. And I think this is one tool in our toolbox to address people wanting to be out in the field hunting. And so what would you need? What do you think you would need to start ramping up in 2023 budget?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Salazar Henry, I think what we could do, and I think we're pretty close there. I think, so some of our proposed fee schedules, I think we're running the numbers right now. I think we would have that pretty soon to say, here's all the properties. I think the difficult part that we're having, and that will probably take a little bit of time, is this a property that has use currently that's really high public demand, and they want to see us paying that dollar amount? I think we could look at pretty soon here, if we kept all the programs in the property under the new fee schedule, what is that dollar amount? I think we could have that pretty soon. Is that going to fit into the budget or not? We don't know quite at this second, but within a couple of months or a month, I think we could easily get to that point. Then if the determination is that there's enough money in the current budget to keep the current properties in under this new fee schedule, I think it'd be easy to sign agreements by April 1st for that. If there's cutting, I think that's when we're going to have to really go out with field ops and asking what do you think a use on this property is? Is it a high use property? And start cutting down those properties that we want to remove, working with those landowners. And that gets a little bit tricky, get to the April 1st deadline. But that initial cut of, let's keep everything in under that assumption, what's our budget, what are we like? I think we could have that within a month to figure out, are we there? Can we do it with the current budget that was approved by the commission in August?
Okay. Now, my last question is how do you now, how do you now and how would you in the future incorporate the field district officers who live in those communities where these properties are, that are able to gauge the amount of hunting pressure that they see or fishing pressure? How do they play a role in recommending properties to go after to try to deal with this?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Salazar Henry, a lot of the property recommendations for us to reach out to landowners do come from field ops. For example, Berendo Creek is a fishing property outside of Roswell that came up through field ops local officers saying we really could use a fishing area in here. And then we start working in the negotiations of here's the money we could offer, those kind of things. So we do go out. Gary works with field ops to discuss properties that are of importance. District officers suggest properties. And then we do know of use too because of their patrols. I think it's harder in that small game realm as much as the big game realm of, okay, is there a lot of use, is there not a lot of use? But we definitely work well on, and them providing input on, you really should go after this property or not, those kind of things.
So I actually have one more last question. You made me think of it. When you're deciding to negotiate agreements, either now or in the future, or most likely in the future, I guess, will you be able to have some flexibility to say, we really need this turkey property here so we can spread out and provide more quality hunting? Will you be able to put that in your evaluation of what properties you want to go after?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Salazar Henry, absolutely. I think that's kind of the goal of this is, properties in the Northeast are going to be pronghorn properties that we'll try to seek for a lot, and turkey's a prime example. And then there's going to be a time where we're going to have to fall out, where we're at a cap. What is the biggest priority? Where are we lacking, and what areas are we lacking? I think that's the other big part is where are there parts of the state where there's very little public access? GMU 41, those kind of GMUs where we have very little public access, a few draw permits. Can we get more properties in there, offer more draw permits, those kind of things to get access increased is how we're looking at it.
Thank you, Stuart.
And actually, I have a question, and it may sound kind of naive, but I recognize Open Gate is essentially for limited access, right? Primarily, that's what we're looking at.
Yeah.
But technically, if I'm a private landowner, I could also be in the E-Plus program and for that same property, and I could have some tags. So I could have some other hunters on that private land, but also be providing access on the agreement. It almost looks like a double whammy, double dip.
Madam
I don't
Chair,
know.
Madam Chair, we do not currently have any enrolled elk properties. We would propose that if you're enrolling that property, and if, let's say, it's an over-the-counter property for deer or pronghorn, we would limit that use on the private land as well. And so it really would be, if they're going to go into that program, you don't get that other program type of a thing, if that makes sense.
Thank you, thank you, that's very helpful. If I have no other comments from commissioners, I have a speaker card, but I don't see him. Jesse Dubell? There he is, okay, very good.
Testing, there we go. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission, and Chief Lively. I just would like to state as the Executive Director of the New Mexico Wildlife Federation that we strongly support any and all efforts to expand the Open Gate program, to continue working on the program and trying to maximize the number of acres that are enrolled. So thank you very much. I appreciate the presentation, Chief Lively.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Commissioner.
I want to put somebody on the spot. Colleen, will you come up and give me your thoughts on this on behalf of mule deer? And Carrie, would you also can you feel like you could talk on behalf of outfitters and private landowners? I just would like to make sure that we're headed in the right direction with.
Yes, Madam Chair, Commissioner Salazar Henry, thank you for inviting us up to speak on this. We are in full support of having some reform to the Open Gate program. It can open tremendous opportunities to our sportsmen across the state. Also keeping in mind private property owners' rights and any sort of benefit that those landowners are making to wildlife habitat on those properties is also key priority, at least for the eyes of the Mule Deer Foundation, and ensuring that all, normal laws and everything are followed during game hunts. But I think this was a great presentation. Thank you, Chief Lively, for putting that together and opening the door to discussing more about Open Gate. So thank you.
I'm going to be much more brief. My initial thoughts are positive, and
yay.
I think this is, good to explore, and I will read the language when it comes out.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you for indulging me, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, we also have 2 comments on Zoom. Matthew, you are permitted to talk.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak on Open Gates today. My name is Matthew Manjares. I run a nonprofit here in New Mexico geared towards youth stewardship engagements on private properties across the state, as well as once-in-a-lifetime opportunities for our veterans. One of our landowners used to be in the Open Gate program, and after talking to him, he's in Unit 42 there. It's a prime turkey opportunity. He had some issues, I guess, that led for him falling out of the program. It wasn't about the money, but he had a few different behaviors that were taking place at the Open Gate that were just basically representation of bad apples. He would like to suggest that maybe, and I know it's just the teacher in me to call it an accountability board, but the idea that when you come into an Open Gate, just as when you come into a state park, you fill out a little placard that one piece sticks into your window and the other piece goes into a receptacle. In Santa Rosa's case, it's paying for day use or for a campsite. He suggested that on this placard you would have your vehicle license plate number, the time of entering the Open Gate, and your name. And if you did that and you put that into the placard, then at that time, if something went on at the open gate, we would know who we would look for or who we would talk to. He also made mention that there were several different trespass violations that occurred while the open gate was open. And on most instances, it was the, oh, well, we didn't know, or, how are we to know kind of comments. And so he figured that if you put a signage up on your accountability board that also had your rules for the open gate, species that are to be harvested, and a map that encompassed the open gate, that at that point, as a hunter and a participant of the open gate, you would be taking on your own accountability. And this also covers the landowner in the idea that, there's no questions about where the attendee is supposed to be, what, is to be harvested during that time. And I think just maybe revamping a little bit of accountability for the open gate program would lead to us keeping more properties for a longer duration. This relationship.
Thank you, Matthew. I appreciate that, but do we have another speaker or another person?
Yes, ma'am. Madeline, you are unmuted.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners, Chief Wiley. Thanks for the presentation. And I'm here just representing myself. I hunt. I'm also a landowner in Santa Fe County. And while I don't deal with hunting access issues, I live between two incredibly popular high-use trail networks that access city, county, and federal land. And there's a really significant trespass, illegal trail construction, parking issue that I've really only been able to work with my neighbors on via good partnerships with agencies. And so I think the perspective I just bring to this is when these programs are well resourced, they're not just achieving their goals, they're actually creating on a whole a better relationship between landowners and the public and the agency. And so I just want to offer my support for this. And, from that perspective of someone who deals with other types of use and insurance questions and trying to be a good neighbor and support outdoor recreation, I just think as much support and staff as you can give something like this is so important for making it work. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew Manjaris, and thank you, Madeline Carey. I apologize, Matthew, I did not mean to be disrespectful by cutting you off, but I think we have a 3-minute restriction, and I'm just starting to watch the clock, and I realized that I was hearing the beep, whatnot. So thank you. Thank you both. Are there any other comments? Okay, I see a no. So that, in that case, I think we are ready to move on.
Madam Chair, just,
Yeah.
Chief, if I may, Chief
Yes.
Wiley, what do you need from us to move this to the next step, to have, as Commissioner Salazar Henry expressed, if there's room in the budget to start ramping up, I think we understand we would want to create a dedicated fund. There's the fee schedule to update, so there's both rule and legislation, and eventually, greater sources of funding. So what do you need from us to move forward?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Basbach, I think the first thing, clarity, is the fee schedule is not set by rule, luckily. The fee schedule is set by the commission. So what it could be is we bring a fee schedule to you all for approval. If we determine that we want to go down this path. I think that's the question that we want a little bit of clarity on, is this something that the commission feels we should move down? We will do, as I described with Commissioner Salazar Henry, of trying to figure out what we have right now in the budget. If with the current properties we have, can we cover it with this fiscal year budget, those kind of things, and then come to you with a fee schedule. I think it could be a discussion on, do we need to have the fee schedule go out to public comment, those kind of things. I would leave that all up to you all if you feel that it is necessary, but we will develop that here shortly. We'll run the models with our properties to show what the costs are and then determine where we are budgetarily wise. Are we talking the properties we're enrolled right now, is it going to move it to 270,000 maybe, because some are coming down on a small game fee? That's, again, the majority of our properties we have right now are small game. We do have a couple of big game properties that will increase, but it may not be a wash. I don't know until we run those numbers, so we may not have a big difference in that fiscal year. If it's something that is a discussion where We're at 200,000 roughly right now, but this is going to move it for all those properties to 400 or 500. We're going to have to look at budgetary issues because we might have to cut out of one program to pay this, or we drop properties out. So I think what we really need to do, and we'll work on that, is, and like I said, within the next month, have that. We can maybe, if you all feel comfortable, we could discuss in the Hunt Structure Committee or something like that shortly to get a perception. And then if we feel comfortable, bring it back to the next commission meeting with a fee schedule, I guess would be my proposal, if we feel like it's time to move on that.
Yeah, I'd like
You
that.
all feel like it's time to move on that.
Madam Chair, Vice Chair, I guess I would also point out that you approved a small increase in the other cost category, which is where these leases come from, in our budget, so we can evaluate how to prioritize that funding and see if it would make a difference. You know, if we do move to 400, could we afford that? And those sorts of things. And that might be a good stepwise approach into this. And then once we see where we're headed, as we build the budget for the next fiscal year, we can build in that larger sum.
So are we talking about a potential budget impact to the current FY22 budget at all? So you said you build these agreements by April. So the new fee schedule, you would bring it to us, we'd approve it, but you wouldn't use it till 2023?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Salazar Henry, we sign the agreements in April, but pay them after the hunting season. So they don't get money up front.
Okay.
And so we pay them, so the budget payments would come after July of 2022, so it would be the fiscal year 23 budget.
So I'm good with this, because if we know in the next month for sure that it may be 400,000 and we can't find it in the current budget proposal, we can do a special appropriation with the Senate Finance or whoever to get the additional money in out of cash balance. Okay, I'm good, thank you. Do we need a motion to ask them to proceed and bring this fee schedule to the next
I don't
meeting?
think so. And I think the director is also shaking his head. I don't see that. I appreciate Vice Chair's question, you know, essentially what is the path forward? I think this agenda item was a discussion item. It was not an action item. But I think a lot of this discussion, I want the commission, the department, and the members of the general public to know that we do not sit back and twiddle our thumbs. I know the vice chair and all of the commissioners, all of us will be working behind the scenes with the department on this anyway. Vice chair has had Open Gate on his radar screen, but so has Commissioner Salazar Henry as the chair of the committee on finance. So I know, Director, you'll be working very closely with them. So I think we have a good path forward. Let's just continue working on these issues, okay?
Sounds good.
Very good. The next agenda item is number 13, general public comments. I don't see anyone here in the room coming to the microphone. Ms. Bickford, do we have anybody online?
Madam Chair, I just pushed the message out to them, but at this point, we do not have anybody that has raised their hand.
Okay. So, in that case, I'll just give a few minutes. What we can do then is proceed right into agenda item number 14, which is the executive session, which is closed to the public. This is where the commissioners will vote on whether to adjourn into the executive session. And Vice Chair, I love, yes, your mic.
Did we not say that the director was going to use the general comments for his report?
My apologies.
So I didn't know where we were on that.
No, during the lunch hour, I did have a discussion with the Attorney General. And because it was not on the agenda, I think it would be inappropriate to have him speak during the general public session.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yes, we're not going to have that. And my apologies to the department, because I think that's something that's very important to all of us, the commission and the members of the public, to hear the great things that are happening in all parts of the department. So thank you, Commissioner, for asking. Vice Chair, do you have a motion for us, or somebody else?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion. Let's see, I move to adjourn into executive session, close to the public, pursuant to section.
Your microphone.
Oh. Okay, here we go. I move to adjourn into executive session, close to the public pursuant to section 10-15-1H8 NMSA 1978 to discuss, it's 10-15-1H7 NMSA 1978 to discuss items pursuant to attorney-client privilege litigation. Pending litigation. Sorry. I need my agenda. Thank you. Thanks. And to discuss property acquisition, purchase, or disposal pursuant to 10-15-1H8 NMSA 1978, and to discuss items pursuant to section 10-15-1H2 NMSA 1978 personnel matters, as listed in agenda item 14, subsections A, B, and C.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner. Director, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Salazar Henry.
Yes.
Commissioner Lopez.
Yes.
Commissioner Bates.
Yes.
Another thumbs up. Vice Chair Vespel.
Yes.
Chair Salazar Hickey.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay. Thank you. Good evening. We're back. This is the State Game Commission meeting resuming on Friday, October 22nd, and it is now 6:15. It's been a long day and a very good, healthy executive discussion. I unfortunately do not have my notebook open, and I'm going to look to the Vice Chair. I think we need, or could it be you, Director Sloan?
Madam Chair, I believe I'll read it for the commission. This commission had adjourned into executive session closed to the public. During the executive session, the commission discussed only those matters specified in its motion to adjourn and took no action as to any matter. And I guess I would just ask that the commission verify that statement is true.
Yes, that's true.
And I would say that is true. It's true.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the last agenda item is a motion to adjourn, but before we adjourn, we typically describe when is our next meeting. Thank you, Commissioners, Department, as well as members of the public. I want you to know that we will be meeting again on Monday, November 15th. And I believe the date and location will be set by the department, possibly in Albuquerque. Is that correct, Director?
Madam Chair, that's correct. It'll be probably 9 a.m., November 15th, in Albuquerque at a location to be determined.
Okay, very good. So, last agenda item is to adjourn. Do I have
Move to adjourn.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Meeting is so adjourned. Aye.